There we go. That's better. Get some chairs for you guys. We will call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Sean Lucas,
Here.
Justin Orff,
Here.
Jared Giddens,
Here.
Aaron Peterson,
Here.
Darlene Graham. Here. Amy Hookstrat.
Here.
I would ask Scout Hudson Ross to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you, Hudson. Move on to our consent agenda. Would anyone like to remove any items from the consent agenda?
Nope.
Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So made. Second.
Roll call, please.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to our service awards. First, we have Ryan Strom. Strom, right? I think that's right. Okay. With the police department for 5 years. Chief.
Mayor, Council, Sergeant Strom's been with us, as you know, for 5 years. In that time period, he's served a number of roles in our organization. Right now, he's been assigned to the Operations Bureau, and he is a road sergeant. As well as those duties, he is a assistant team leader for the Nixa tactical team. He has been a patrol corporal. He's a field training officer. He is an active shooter response instructor, a basic SWAT instructor, and one of our drone pilots. So as you can see, he does a wide variety of different things for us. On a personal note, he is a very reliable employee that the men and women trust. And so what I mean by that is he has good judgment, and his men trust his judgment, and that's not a trait that comes by easily to earn the respect of your subordinates like that. So we're very happy to have him. We look forward to having him for many years. And thank you, Sergeant Strom.
We've got a few of these. I think we'll just save the pictures till the end. Macy, wherever Macy went. Okay, there she is. And move on to our next award, Wendy Buckmaster, 25 years with the police department.
Yeah. Mayor, Council, Wendy could not be with us tonight. She got some short notice news that her son is shipping out for the military.
Oh, wow.
And so she wanted to spend those last few moments with him before he was going overseas. But what I can say about Wendy is that 25 years is a long time to serve the city of Nixa. She first started in 1996 as a dispatcher. And then as the years went by, and as you know, we moved communications over to Christian County, she remained with us. She became a police clerk, and ultimately she's now the supervisor and records custodian and evidence supervisor for the police department. And you know, she's one of those people that's a go-to employee that you know that they're going to be there every day. They're going to do everything that they need to do to make sure that your organization is successful behind the scenes. So not out there in the face of the public, but very vital to our department nevertheless.
Our third award this evening is for Nate Hartzell, 5 years with planning and zoning. I think that maybe is like his, third department probably. But Nate.
I don't know, Nate has been with the city of Nixa for 5 years. He's been with planning and development, though, for just about one of those years. I selected Nate to be the city's code compliance official, which he served in that capacity now, like I said, for just a little bit over a year. Nate, in his candidacy for that position, was not the most experienced candidate. In fact, he had no experience doing code compliance. I selected Nate anyways because Nate demonstrated through the course of his interviewing that he had what I refer to as a public service orientation. I can train anybody to do code compliance investigations, but what is more difficult to train is for somebody to be a truly caring and trustworthy individual, which that's exactly what Nate brings to the table for the city of Nixa. More than that, Nate does the work that he does very diligently. He does it the way that I ask him to do that, and he does treat people very, very well. Nate has tremendous upside. If I were to tag anybody that I know in this organization as having tremendous future leadership potential, it would undoubtedly be Nate. So I'm very grateful for the work that he's done for us.
Congratulations. And our last one this evening is Lisa Brown, 15 years with planning and zoning.
It's
It says
Lisa's-
zoning on the paper. I was going to say development, but it says zoning. But it's on
Close
the paper.
enough. Lisa's been with the city for 15 years. I've only been with her for one of those years. I can tell you that in that one single year that I've known her, I have asked a lot of Lisa. Probably nobody on our team has been under more scrutiny than Lisa has since I've arrived here. She is the face of our department, which makes her the face of this organization to the people who come in the front door and need something from planning and development. I put a lot of emphasis on what comes out of the mouth on that face, and that face, like I said, is usually going to be Lisa. And so I have asked Lisa of a lot of things since I've started here. I've asked her to change a lot of things, and as you can imagine, somebody who's been here for 15 years, doing the same job for 15 years, in my experience, most people don't like that. Most people don't respond well to being asked to change something regularly after having done it for so long. But Lisa has responded very positively to all of that, and I know it's not been easy for her. I'm sure it can be frustrating being asked to change so many things. So she's responded very, very well to those things. I'm very, very grateful for the work that she does day in and day out for our department and for helping us. Lisa, if you don't know her, is also hilarious. Very, very funny person. And I've come to learn that she's also a fantastic baker. Unfortunately, what she's not fantastic at is sharing those baked goods. So something to work on there. But again, very, very thankful for the work that she does for our department.
And thank you all for your service. We will move on to our visitor section. Our listed visitor is Cub Scout Pack 200, Den 3 Arrows.
Good evening. My name is Matt Roth with Cub Scout Pack 200. We meet at the Nixa Christian Church. I'm here with Grayson, Carter, and Hudson, and this is our den chief, Drew. These boys, these three here, this is their last year with Cub Scouts. They're moving up to Boy Scouts or Scouts next year. They're currently working on their Arrow of Light, and it's building a better world requirement, and that's when they meet with the government or community leader and learn about their role in helping the community. And I want to say thank you for Councilman Lucas for setting up a tour for us. They really enjoyed that, and thank you for answering their questions. Really appreciate that. And I think a couple of them have some comments, and so I'll let Hudson make a comment here.
My favorite part of the tour was the courtroom because, that kind of like take cares of the law, and I kind of like that stuff. And the ranks of Cub Scout that I've done are the tiger, the wolf, bear, weeblo, and then now arrow. And I've been in Cub Scouts for 4 years, and this is now my 5th. Thank you.
Congratulations.
I'm Carter. This is my 3rd year of scouting, and my favorite part of the tour was also the court, because I am very interested in like that kind of stuff, like law. If I ever do get a letter that the government requests me to be on jury duty, I will definitely accept. Yeah, that was my favorite part of the tour. I've gone through the bear and weeble ranks. I'm currently in Arrow Light, and yeah.
I am Drew Edmondson, and what I liked about the tour was everything, because I've never really stepped into this kind of building before. And it was actually really cool seeing what happens here and what everybody has their jobs. I've been in Scouts for about maybe 8 to 9 years now, because I joined in 1st grade, and that was before they added the lion rank, which was for kindergartners. And I'm actually in the troop and not the pack. That's what these guys are working for, is so they can get from the pack, where all the cubs are, and get to the troop. And I'm helping them guide to that direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next visitors. Cindy?
Mr. Aaron Fleming.
Mayor, Council. Aaron Fleming, 568 East Hill Wallen Place, Nixa. Pardon my notes, it's not for a lack of preparedness, but a necessary memory tool for me due to the result of a traumatic brain injury sustained about 10 years ago. So it's better that I have this piece of paper in front of me, or we're going to run a filibuster, and I guarantee nobody wants to hear me talk that long, myself included. Again, my name is Aaron Fleming. I'm a retired sergeant, United States Marine Corps, and my call sign, going back to the TBI, my call sign is 10 strikes, because I have been in 10 improvised explosive device detonations throughout my career. So again, it's good that I have this in front of me. The meat and potatoes of this is the Massacre Group of Keller Williams is hosting a Veterans Day 5K here on November 6th due to benefit the families and children of our veterans here in Nixa. I'll give you a little bit of context about this and how I feel about it, where I come from, and then when I'm done here, I hope to turn this over, with your permission, to Jason Massengill, who's going to kind of take on the other half of the presentation here. I spent a career in the Marine Corps Special Operations, the majority of my time over there anyway. And I left 100% disabled and retired in March of last year. During that time, I've done 6 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, resulting in complications due to gunshot wounds, TBI, and extensive nerve damage. I was a counterintelligence operator, explosives breacher, and linguist. And interestingly, with the counterintel and linguist parts of that, I was exposed to both sides of the conflict, particularly in Iraq, where I was able to speak and understand Arabic, and it allowed me to see an entirely different side of that conflict, instead of having a language barrier, behind which to hide, like most of my peers had, solely because they didn't speak the language. I've had friends killed on Christmas morning, Easter, throughout the rest of the year. Sometimes I still catch glimpses of them in the crowd before I have to remind myself that that is not in fact them. Over the years, my wife and I have crunched the numbers, particularly in the last couple years since I've been out, and we've done the math. I've got more friends in the ground in Arlington and other places than I do upright and walking. On the day of my retirement ceremony, I had to decide whether or not I was going to show up for that or if I was going to be attending a funeral and range dedication for another friend of mine who was killed in Afghanistan. He'd stepped on a legacy Soviet landmine, and there was not really a whole lot to show at that event. If you want to hear some horror stories, you've come to the right place. I'm not going to tell any more. But for me personally, it's been one close call after another, year after year after year. And back at home while I was deployed, my wife served as our battalion family readiness officer, and she was both on the service member death notification team, as well as waiting for that knock on the door in the event that something had happened to me. My kids didn't sign up for this, but they were some good sports, and 3/4 of them, this was the only life that they knew, so much so that my older two have respectively gone into the Navy and Marine Corps themselves. But for years, they were moving every 3 years. New schools, new friends, one parent to own most of the time, the other in perpetual danger most of the time, no idea what each new day would bring. Currently, I'm happily a stay-at-home dad in retirement, and I hang out with my toddler all day, loving every minute of it because I missed this age with my older 3 due to deployments and professional work experiences that were outside of my town. I don't take a minute of that for granted because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that I'm perpetually living on borrowed time. I've since found myself in the role of operations and logistics consultant for the Massacre 5K Hero Run, which is not a partisan event or a political mechanism, far from it. It's an event that's intended to bring the community as a whole closer together by doing something fun on a Saturday and recognizing and rewarding the children of Nixa's veterans. They've each had their own unique roles, the children, sacrifices, and experiences associated with having grown up with a parent or parents in the military. That is the impetus behind our community event. Let's come together and show some support for these military kids and families. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, not the friendliest place on earth, but Nixa is a small slice of Midwest heaven to me. Let's go for a run, generate maximum amount of scholarship funding for Nixa students, and have a safe and enjoyable time together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you for your service.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing, and to your family as well.
Yes.
And you have many more friends than you know, Aaron. Did Jason put in a card too?
Yes. Jason
Let's
Messingale
do his
is up.
first since it ties directly to this one.
He's next.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Well, that worked out
Jason
well.
Massingale.
We didn't even have to move. It worked out based.
Oh, and he's got the
Mr.
t-shirt,
Massingale.
too.
Jason Maskell, 201 Village Center, Nixa. I'm with the Massacre Group, obviously. I asked Aaron to come in and share a little bit of his story so you could hear a little bit of the inspiration behind why it's so important for us to put this on as a community. This is not about me. This is not about a political gain in any way. This is simply about we genuinely believe that there's a need. We have community members right here that are veterans, that they've sacrificed, their families have sacrificed. So I would love to have your support. I'd love for everybody in here to come out. I'd love for every one of you to run if you wanted to. But the reason why I'm here today is to ask the city of Nixa to waive our fees for the event. So, and if you guys have any questions around the event. And we are partnered with a 501c3, which is the Nixa Education Foundation, so that way we can work to make sure that the scholarship for the event goes towards a Nixa student that their parents served in the military.
So your event is November 6th?
November 6th, yes.
Where does it start?
So the event opens at 7:30 to the public. We're going to have a bunch of businesses. I believe we have right now 23 businesses signed up that all of them have free kids games set up. So anyone that wants to come out, bring the family. The run itself starts at 9, and then at 10 we'll have a 1 mile more family-friendly version of it. The 5K is we have every half mile a former military person that's going to have the role of a drill sergeant that day. And so every half mile, they're going to stop the runners. You can do exercises with the idea, yeah, it's fun, and yeah, it might suck. Yet for a community, though, it gets us a little bit of a taste of what our service members do to train. Richard Shue, that owns Shoebach Bakery, I was talking to him one day, and he said, when I was in the Army, he goes, we were either deployed or we were preparing to deploy. Mm-hmm. He said, there was never a time we weren't training. And he said, even when we were over there, we were still training. And so for this is us showing the community a little bit about what our service members go through. And then on the other side of that, it's also as a city, as a community, it's our opportunity to show our military veterans and service members that we care and that we love them and we see them. It's really important for them to know that we see them.
And where
So,
does it start?
November 6th,
Where?
where? The community center. Right behind the community center at the pavilion is where we'll start. And then the 5K track goes through the subdivision back behind it.
I want to piggyback on that because the Veterans Day ceremony is the following Saturday at the community center, and I would invite all of you to come to that. It's really interesting and amazing to see what they show you that our veterans do.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're doing this.
Any questions?
Any other questions? We've been working on a procedure for such requests, but what we'll just do in this case is go old school. Mr. Woodman will not like that, but we will do it anyway. If someone would like to make a motion to waive the fees, we will accept that.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
We'll let her. We'll let
She got it.
we'll miss her straight. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Maybe we should ask what the fees were, but don't worry about it at this point.
I was going to, but I figured you knew what they were.
They're
I
the
have
same
I
as
have a
last
general
year's.
idea. I've been,
Same as last year.
yeah.
Same as last
Same
year's.
as last year, okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Mascow,
much, Ms. Smith.
I wanted to mention, I don't know if you've thought of this or done this in the past, and I'm sure it's too late for this year, but you might consider in the future contacting the 399th Army Band at Fort Leonard Wood to see if they might want to come and play the national anthem or something.
Well, so actually, the Nixa High School Band, the Crimson Corps, is coming out to play
okay, cool.
the national anthem. And as the race starts, they actually play the fight song as well. And then the JROTC at Nixa comes out and does their color guard performance. So,
That's great.
yeah, so, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Masco. Who you got next, Cindy?
Jeannie Coburn?
Jeannie Coburn, 803 Chicory Court. Jason, what's the website for that? And say it again?
mgherorun5k.com.
Okay. All right. First of all, I wanted to start with, I grew up in a small community in Iowa. My dad was a farmer. My hometown had 800 people in it. It was 3 miles away. My school that I went to was in a town that was 5 miles away, and it had 1,200 people in it. The town that we went to for most of our groceries was 14 miles away, and it had 22,000 people in it. 95% of the people that I graduated high school with were people that I started kindergarten with. Probably not unlike Nixa several years ago. One thing about living in a community like that is people are always supportive of each other, as you know from here. It's not uncommon if there's a farmer in the area who's suffering from cancer, or his wife is suffering from cancer or something, and cannot harvest their grain. There will be 10 to 15 farmers driving down the road with their combines, and they will knock out that field for that farmer without even batting an eye. My dad raised cattle. He bought feeder cattle and sold them. The man that he bought his cattle from lived not very far from here, actually. 90% of the cattle that he bought were from southern Missouri. Bud had a checkbook that was my dad's, that he would write the checks for the cattle, because in those days we didn't have wire transfers or credit cards, so he would write a check for the cattle that he purchased at the sale barn for my dad, and that would be thousands of dollars. So, and my dad trusted him for doing that. At one time, he carried 19 different checkbooks for 19 different farmers. And even in those days, thousands of dollars worth of cattle was a lot of money. Bud and his family have nothing politically in common with my family. But one person asked me one time, what does integrity mean? And I gave the example of Bud with the checkbooks. And he is the type of person who would give the shirt off of his back for anybody. And we would do the same for his family. I went to his wife's funeral just a few weeks ago, actually. Very dear family, love them tremendously. With all that to say is that I am grateful for living in a community that supports each other, and I'm grateful for the service that you have all decided to serve the community as members of the city council and the mayor. It's a thankless job in many ways. You don't get paid for it much. You don't get any satisfaction other than knowing that you're doing it for your community. I believe with all my heart that everything that you do is in the best interest of Nixa. We may not agree always on information and things that you decide and processes, that's okay, but I believe that you have integrity. And I refuse to believe otherwise. So I'm just here really to thank you for your service to this community. I'm thankful for the city employees. I've lived here for 5 years. It's a great community. I think it's a wonderful place to live. And I just wanted to thank you for your service. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huber.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next one.
Bailey Beard.
Bailey Beard from 630 North Alexandria Street. Sorry, I'm kind of short. I'm here today not out of concern about the council, but rather concern about the behavior of some of our Nixa citizens. In the last several months, I have witnessed ignorance, unruly behavior, and disdain in these city council meetings and around our community. I believe in the power of speech, and I believe every citizen has a right to their own opinion. However, slander and falsehoods are the downfall of our community. How are we to make Nixa better if we don't even have a respect for its citizens? I wanted to take a second to highlight some of the amazing things Nixa has achieved. Hopefully, this reminds some of the citizens sitting in this very room what Nixa can accomplish when we don't waste time on petty elections and arguments. I want to start off by saying how Nixa created a partnership to buy energy from the current largest solar farm in Missouri. This project reduced the city's carbon footprint by 10,542 metric tons a year. In the past 10 years, we have seen an extension of over 20 miles of sidewalks. We received the 2019 MWEA Water Facility Award. We have the lowest sales tax in the Springfield Metro. And Nixa has had an 80% reduction in city debt in the last 10 years. For reference, in 2011, we had $23.3 million in city debt, now to just $4 million in 2020. These are just some of the many examples of how our town is strong. We live in a community that is blessed to have strong leaders that care about our neighbors. To those who have worked tirelessly during the peak of the pandemic to keep our city strong, thank you. Your efforts are not unnoticed. To those that sat in the sidelines and now choose to complain over the battles, or after the battle's over, let me leave you with this. Being a good citizen goes far beyond attending meetings so you can have your voice heard over every topic, regardless of your knowledge on that topic. If you truly care about our city of Nixa, you will volunteer in our community, you will reach out to your neighbors in need, and most importantly, you will treat each other with a little bit of kindness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beard.
Thank you.
I think we normally say no applauding, but I think the kids keep leading the applause, so I'm going to have to let that go probably. Okay, who's next, Cindy?
Jeff Belcher.
Mr. Belcher. So don't get off on the wrong foot, Mr. Belcher. Will not be responding to anything from Facebook videos, memes, whatever you see on Facebook. Also not be responding to any issues from the campaign. As an employee of the city, executing my role as mayor, it is not appropriate for me to speak on campaign issues that you may bring up. We're happy to respond to any questions you have related to items within the business of the city. Just want to make sure you get all the time that you were allotted.
Okay, and as far as that goes, I don't know why this ain't working. I don't appreciate last meeting threatening and intimidating me with law enforcement to have me removed from the podium for going 3 seconds over. was a little bit of a reach. That's a subject that'll be taken up at a later time. I do notice a lot of times you're thanking speakers for being civil. I try. I'm very passionate, I'm very outspoken, I voice my opinion, and if it hurts a few feelings, it hurts a few feelings. I'm not going to apologize for it. However, I've altered my methodology this time. I'm just going to play a small statement to make sure I do not go over my time, and when this statement is over, I'm going to walk away.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher.
Scramblers, welcome to the show, my friends, and Tom Hart's with us. Hey, the city of Nixa is getting ready to have a recall election. This is correct. And based on the definitions that are found in their city charter, not only the mayor, but every single one of those individuals on city charter should be recalled. Okay. Now, I understand why it is that the group or the people who are doing it have done it this way. But the mayor took powers that aren't granted to him either in the city charter. He's making the case that because of an ordinance that was passed that he has some supreme authority and that the city council voted to give him that authority. Well, within the confines of the Nixa city charter, that authority doesn't exist. The city council, and this was part of the problem up in St. Louis County too, the city aldermen, the city council, the city whatever you want to call those people, they can't give their power to the mayor. They have no application for that because the power of their authority comes from the people.
Right, it's not theirs to give.
Right, and if the people didn't grant them that authority, they don't have that authority. So when Mayor, what's his last name, Steele, I think, when he makes the case that he passes Ordinance 2111, which is actually in violation of the city charter, and it's also in violation of his other mayoral orders. But what I find interesting is that it's set up like a piece of legislation. So in reading this, what's not supposed to be an ordinance, it's supposed to be an emergency declaration, it reads and looks exactly like a city ordinance. So the city ordinance was passed and approved by and created by the mayor. The mayor took a dictatorial power that he doesn't have and created all kinds of havoc. And in the first bill, they exempted all kinds of different people from the mask ordinance. So you had your employers, churches, yada, yada, yada. He didn't do that in the second one. He basically said if you're going outside your house, you're going to have a face covering on or else. He doesn't have that power. So when you've got people who are finally standing up and going, you know, the people control government. Government is designed in a capacity to make it difficult for them to regulate a free people. When you start taking liberties with the people's liberties, you deserve to be removed from office. And there's even a provision in the city charter of Nixa where the council they are the judge of the election and qualifications of its members and for the grounds for forfeiture. So the city council at this point should be recommending that they all be removed from office, including the mayor, and just make it so that the city council's vacant until the next election, because none of them are within the confines of the city charter. The city charter actually says it's to abide by the Missouri Constitution. There's parts in this city charter that are actually in violation of the Missouri Constitution, but the people voted for it. If you're not going to read what's in the document, you're not going to understand it, stay home.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Oh, Mr. Belcher, can you please reference what that was and who it was from, since
Yes, that's what I was
we
gonna
let you
ask.
play it? If you could just say where you got that from and who it was.
Am I obligated? It's on our website, you can check it out.
Okay. So we have a
Someone that we don't-
undocumented audio recording. Not sure where that came from. I assume it's probably not an attorney, probably not someone from the state Supreme Court or anyone like that. Referencing, it's fairly simple to look at the Home Rule Charter. Anyone can go on the city website and read that, section 2.1, the first section after the preamble that says why we were doing it. It says, the city should have all powers the General Assembly of the State of Missouri has authorized to confer upon any city, providing such powers are consistent with the Constitution of the state and are limited or are not limited or denied by the charter or by statute. The city shall, in addition to its home rule powers, have all powers conferred by law. So, Mr. Woodman, under your reading of that, I assume since you're the one that wrote all those ordinances, that you probably agree.
Yeah. I can state that under the current constitutional scheme in Missouri, constitutional charter cities, the way that the Constitution refers to the charter itself, they are not power-granting documents, they are power-limiting documents. There was actually a constitutional change, I believe, in the 70s. I couldn't quote for you the exact date. Early in the 70s where that flipped. It used to be that your charters were power-granting documents. So a prior municipality that I came from, the city of Springfield, their charter was written in the 1940s, and so it was written under that prior constitutional scheme, and their charter is very detailed. They had to expressly call out what powers they wanted under that scheme. Nixa's charter was written 10 to 11 years ago under the new constitutional scheme, where under that constitutional provision, the council, the mayor, the city has all the powers possible that the General Assembly could grant. And that's been the law in this state since the 1970s.
Thank you, Mr. Woodman. I also believe we have several members of the Home Rule Charter Committee in the audience as well. If any of them would like to speak, they can do that at the end of the visitor section. Who's next, Cindy?
We have Mr. Scott Perryman.
Mr. Perryman. Good to see you again, sir.
Nice to see you all. My name is Scott Perryman. I live at 916 Fort Court, Nixa, Missouri. And it's wonderful to see all of you guys again. And for those of
Scott,
the
if you
staff.
could turn the mic up there.
Yeah,
just
let me get this up here. So
Bailey's a
you
little
can hear
short.
me. Okay.
Puts it down there.
There we go. All right. Well, anyway, it's good to be back. I'm a little nervous. It's been a while. I'm a little rusty. For some of you here in the building tonight that aren't aware, I served on city council, and up until just in April, I served for 3 years with this council, and it was a great honor of my life. The reason I'm here tonight is to talk about the recall and about Mayor Steele. I got to serve with this gentleman for 3 years, and we didn't always agree on everything. There were certain votes I'm sure I made. He might have voted differently, and then we might have had differences of opinion sometimes. But nonetheless, Mr. Steele is a man of integrity. This young lady was talking about the word integrity tonight. I have never seen Mr. Steele not make a decision that he didn't base on the welfare of the people of Nixa. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. I realize that this dust-up over the recall began over the masking ordinance. Mr. Steele called me prior to doing that, and I did know that he was going to do that. It was done above board. He conferred with myself and the other members of the council, I assume, as well, and I just, I know that Brian did what he did because he believed it was the right thing to do, and I think that's a good leader right there, anyone that'll stand up for what they believe in. If he's guilty of anything, it's for standing up what he believes in and for doing what he thinks is the best for the safety of the citizens and for our businesses. I also have a business here in Springfield, in Nixa. I came from Springfield, sorry. But at any rate, I also have a business in Nixa, and I'm not here to rehash the mask mandating, but I know that Mr. Steele made that choice to help keep the businesses open, to help not only with the health and safety of the community, but also for our business community too, so that there would not be another lockdown mandated from higher authorities than we are, that we had already experienced. I mean, quite frankly, it scared us, quite, I know it scared me a lot. I don't know if anybody else here was afraid during the heydays of the pandemic, and there was no vaccine, and there was no end in sight, and we just are coming out of a lockdown, and, things were starting to open up again, and we wanted to keep them open. I know that as a council member, I had voted no on a mask mandate, and that had been, I believe, in April, and I think it was later on. July, thank you, sir. And I know it was later on, several months, that Mr. Steele had done the mandate. And I'm not sure, had we put that back to a council vote, I very well may have voted for that, in favor of that as well. And, but with that being said, let me tell you what about Brian. He is the most capable one, when I was here, of any, I felt of myself or any other council member to be mayor. He is extremely intelligent, extremely caring, very knowledgeable. He does a great job as a mayor, and he's done a heck of a job as a mayor, and he's just done a lot for this community, and I think he needs to continue to be mayor. And not only that, if someday he wanted to run for a higher office, I would believe I would vote for Mr. Steele, absolutely, because again, he's a man of integrity, and I think he's not afraid to take a little political flack, if need be, to stand up for what he believes in. And that's priceless. We don't have a lot of that. It's called courage. I think it was a profile of courage. And I thank you for it, Mr. Steele. I thank you for making that tough decision. Whether or not all of us agree with it or not, I thank you for the courage to make those tough decisions in tough times. And I guess that's about all I have to say about it. And I hope that anyone who is here tonight that lives inside the city that can vote would join me in voting no to not recall Mr. Steele and allow him to finish his term, continue to do a great job as a mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Who's next, Cindy?
Next up is Ron Sanders.
Hi, I'm Ron Sanders, 976 Glen Oaks Drive. First thing I'd like to say is I hope everybody does show up and support Jason Massengale's run. I think it would be a great deal for everybody to go out there that can run, find out what it's like, maybe get a little taste of, push-ups and sit-ups and all that fun stuff that we did for, so many years. Switching gears. Tonight I have a little bit of a history lesson. Back in November, it was in September and October, I looked at all the visitors sections. I was gone the whole month of October, but there were no visitors for all the meetings in September and October. Nothing was on the minutes. But in November 9th, there were visitors. And on November 9th, that's when the visitor section, which I call the People's Voice or the Citizen section, was moved to the end of the meeting. So people could only voice their concerns or anything about anything that happened at that meeting after it was already done. So bills were already passed, bills were already voted on and everything, and then the citizens could come in afterwards and speak about it, but why? It's already done. I voiced my opinion there. On November 23rd, I came in and I spoke about the mask mandate, and I disagreed with it. And at the same time, I was a little bit more ruffled that the citizen's voice was put at the end of the meeting again. I explained in December. In December, I explained during a council bill reading that this is the reason that the visitor section should be at the beginning of the meeting. And my objection last summer was, the summer of 2020, was that the second reading of bills should also have a public comment section before the city council voted on it. So just to get this history all straight, never once have I ever come here in public and stated that the visitor section should be moved to the end of anything except the second reading of an ordinance. Now, maybe there was some confusion. Maybe there were some people that were a little bit confused and they didn't go back and look at actual minutes. But I went back and looked at the minutes just to make sure I was not mistaken. And this goes to the integrity, Mr. Mayor. Okay? Not once have I ever come here and said that the people's voice, the citizens' voice, should ever be at the end of the meeting. Okay? It's been stated that I did after the last meeting when I said I never did that. So let the record stand. This is straight out of the minutes, going all the way back to the summer of 2020. Now, you want to talk about integrity, sir? Let's have some integrity. These people want integrity, they see integrity in you, but when you lie about another citizen, citizens become not so civil. I've been civil up to this point, but now you've done it to my name, and that was absolutely wrong, and that should not stand. And everybody in here that's seen me come in here over and over and over again, if you don't know what had happened, go back and read the minutes. That's what they're there for. Integrity, right? That's what we're here for. We're here to see people that have integrity, and then they lie about a citizen in public. That should not be accepted. And it's not with me.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. I apologize if there was confusion. I think many of us believed at the time, as I stated in the comments last week, that was what had been requested. I think at this point, we did add a second reading. We did add a public hearing to the second reading, which I appreciate your comment on that. And so we have done that in the interim time. As far as saying your name, I explicitly requested not to multiple times, Mr. Sanders, during that meeting. I said, I do not want to say who it is. I did not want to say. I just said that comment had been made. And it was Mr. Belcher who requested multiple times that we say the name. And you said that no one that you knew had said that. And so, as I said, I attempted to not say your name multiple times because I do think that is bad practice. It is not a personal thing, like you've said before. It's not personal. It's the operation of the government and the Home Rule Charter as it is laid out, and I had no intention of doing that. So, thank you for your comments. Who's next?
Logan Lewis.
Apologize. Actually, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and withhold the comments that I'd initially planned on making, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Rich Lewis.
Hi, my name is Rich Lewis. I live at 860 South Hackberry. So, man, we've been on a long road. COVID, recall. But I'd like to take a second to pause all that. Tell that gentleman thank you for his service. Very much so. You're a stud, dude. Thank you. So, I did as Mr. Sanders requested. I went back through everything I could find, watched every YouTube video, which there's multiple YouTube channels, so it's a little bit confusing. There's a lot of personal history here. There really is. But this isn't about personalities. This isn't about getting personal. It's about what's best for Nixa. So as we sit here and we talk about recall, I don't think it's just as simple as, I don't like the decision made. I've heard the phrase, the people weren't listened to. Well, I'll guarantee, because I've talked to some of the people, that there were people who weren't listened to. That's the people who were for the mask mandate when the city council voted no mask mandate. So at some point, somebody wasn't listened to. It's the way with decisions. The people who don't agree with the decision made feel like they lost out. That happens. But thank God we live in America, right? I see this recall as not a negative thing, but this is the people's right. as stated in the Home Rule Charter, as stated in our Constitution. So for Nixa to be going through this, while it sucks, and Mayor Steele, I know it cannot be fun for you, thank God this is America, because other places, we don't have this option. So going into it, I've been asked which side I'm going to take. Frankly, it's not for the public's opinion for me to tell you. But what I think we're missing and what I haven't heard spoke on is consequences of choice. If you choose to vote for the mayor, what are you choosing not to support? That's the first question. If you choose to recall the mayor, what are you choosing to support? That's the first question that this recall brings up. This recall is a serious no. It's not about personality. It's not about personal insults. At the end of the day, we, the citizenry, are potentially overthrowing a just election. That is what the recall stands for. So hurt feelings, emotions, people getting upset one side or down the other needs to be gone. Okay? Second of all, I haven't seen, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but we now have a precedent. We didn't before. This was the first time anything like this, at least in my history and my mom's history, and I think my grandparents' history, but my God, they were old, so I don't know about that, that this has ever happened. Where is our pathway stating what we should do from here on? That's more about what I'm interested in. After this recall, what if COVID 0Z3 comes out and, oh my God, we've got something worse? We now have precedents. We have a power limiting document. Let's get something showing the pathway to what we need to have. Let's be mindful of that along with the recall. Let's continue moving forward, not backwards. I will say this. I come from training for 20 plus years. And I know the gentleman in the back has heard me. I know some of these fine gentlemen over here know what I'm about, know the sentiment. The best thing you can do in an emergency situation is the right thing. The second best thing you can do in an emergency situation is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing. Whether I like it or not, you did something. I don't think you had any ill intent. I don't think anybody on the council had any ill intent. Who thought up COVID, oh, I'm going to screw somebody over now? Nobody does. It just, you guys had the crap dealt with you for your service on the city council. And that sucks that you have to deal with it. So regardless of what decision I make, regardless of what the people decide, kudos to you for doing something. I believe you did what you thought was right. And I will never fault a man for that. Or women, as the city council voted. So for whatever it is, pro-recall, anti-recall, you know what? Thank God we live in America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I've been reviewing the Branson Home Rule Charter. They do have a fairly extensive section on like states of emergency, emergency powers, that kind of stuff that is missing from ours. Ours just says you can do whatever the state says you want to do, says you can do. So I think maybe when we get back to the Home Rule Charter Committee, that would be another item to review.
Some cities also articulate that by ordinance. So the council like pre-delegates that authority if there's been a declared state of emergency.
Be very good. You know, we didn't have the tornado yesterday, but that's always the much more likely scenario than a worldwide pandemic that we had discussed in the past. And so, but having that stuff in place beforehand, I think is always a good choice. You got next.
Jack Carnes.
Good evening. My name is Jack Carnes. I reside at 622 North Maplewood Hills Road here in this great city of Nixa. Let me begin with how much my family and I love our city of Nixa. That is why I've decided to attend tonight's city council meeting. I wanted to have my voice heard, as that is becoming a thing of the past, not only in our great nation, but also our state and now in our city of Nixa. And being transparent, I am a constitutionalist. I want our elected officials to govern by the rules and laws of our government, whether it be national, state, or locally. If any citizen breaks the law, they suffer the consequences for doing so. Our city council failed to follow the city charter, as I understand it, and therefore broke the rule of law. In turn, our mayor did the same. He too broke the rule of law. The mayor failed to serve the citizens of Nixa as he was elected to do so. Our city charter states this in section 311 of legislative proceedings under the letter F, emergency ordinances. I have not been able to find anywhere in our city charter where it states that our city council can give the mayor emergency powers to do anything under any circumstances. If the council wants to vote on an emergency ordinance, as it states in section 311F, they can and should do it that way. But they did not, so that and therefore broke the rule of law. I am neither pro-mask nor anti-mask, but as I understand the city charter, when the mayor told the citizens of Nixa that he was given the power by the council to institute a mask mandate, he too broke the law in doing so. He did not and cannot have the power to do so. The city council could have voted on a temporary ordinance but chose not to. Once again, there are laws, amendments, and ordinances that need to be followed by our elected officials. Your thoughts may have been in the right spot, Mr. Mayor, but I am so tired of hearing, quote, he was only doing this to protect us, and or he had the best of intentions. This isn't a popularity contest. The mayor and our city council failed, as I see it, failed to abide by the laws of our city charter. Therefore, all of you broke the law. As a side note, I don't need the mayor or the city council to assist me or tell me how to take care of myself or my family. If someone wants to wear a mask, I'm all for it. Every individual needs to take care of him or herself without interference from our elected officials. Mr. Steele, this recall is all about accountability to the citizens of Nixa. It may pass or it may not, but I do believe that it has allowed the citizens of Nixa to send a message to all our elected officials. You are not above the law. Integrity and moral character are at risk with our elected officials of Nixa. Let me point out, in your attempts to review the city charter on the required number of signatures, if you try to change this ordinance in the city, you will once again be taking away the voice of the citizens. Your attempts to make us your subjects will become successful. You must now believe, Mr. Steele, that you did not implement and execute your mask mandate correctly. Why would you be putting so much money and effort in your attempts to win this recall vote? You have spent significant funds and resources with your signs and come see the mayor events. There are some of us that have formed a pact called Concerned Citizens of Nixa. There are many citizens that are concerned with the direction of our great city under your leadership. Your info cards tell you are handling and tell us how wonderful you are, and yes, have been brought into your leadership. But your only defense to the recall are your rebuttals on Facebook. Why not in your literature or your info cards? I am really struggling with your stubbornness in breaking the law, the rule of law, or did you just not know the laws of our city charter? I'm baffled. Speaking of your leadership, why have our utility rates and bills gone up so drastically over the past few months? It has recently come to the attention of concerned citizens of Nixa that some of our utility payments are funding other areas of attention or interest in the city, not just to pay for our utility costs. Not sure why that's happening. We have heard about other city shenanigans that had or presently take place in our city. We aren't too sure if that borders corruption. I'm not sure, but I'm sure going to look into it. I can promise you, you will be hearing more from us on these subjects in the future. Just curious, I'm wondering if any of you will ever admit that you broke the rule of law in the city charter. Probably not. And I'm concerned that an unlawful vaccine mandate may be next from our elected officials. Once again, we've heard it often tonight, your integrity and moral character will come into question. I ask that all registered voters listening or watching please vote yes on the recall to save our voice in this great city of Nixa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kearns. Trying to figure out what's some of those things we cannot respond to because they're related to the election. Jennifer could respond to the question of utility rates.
Our rates have not changed Electric rates have not changed since 2017. So the rates are the same. Your utility bill may go up with usage, but the rate of the cost of the power has not changed since 2017. And I didn't specifically hear what you said about money being spent in other areas from the utilities. That's not.
I think the comments related to funding of economic development, Show Me Christian County and Nixa Chamber, other elements like that through the utility funds. I don't know. Jimmy, you want to comment on that?
Economic development obviously benefits the utilities as well. Therefore, they can spend utility funds on economic development. As people grow, businesses grow, the utilities grow. They need water, they need sewer, they need electric. So those are definitely monies well spent out of those utilities.
Yeah. As far as Show Me Christian County, Nixa City Utilities, Ozark City Utilities, or Ozark Water, Liberty Power, and what's the other one? Empire, is it Empire? Ozark Electric, I think Empire Electric as well. So every utility that serves Christian County invests in that, because by bringing additional businesses into Nixa, it allows us to actually lower rates, which we'll be discussing later this evening, because we can increase usage, which allows us to buy in bulk. Power being one thing we can buy in bulk, and allows us to reduce the cost for residents over the course of time. Is there anything else? As far as, I'm not going to comment about signs or anything like that, like I told Mr. Belcher. Is there anything else? That's good? Okay. All right, anything else?
No one else has signed up.
Okay, we will leave the visitor section open if anyone else would like to speak at this time. And we will close the visitor section. Thank you all for your comments. Move on to our agenda. Presentations. Mr. Tyson, annexation.
Good evening. I'd like to start with an apology. As I was putting the finishing touches on these slides, the thought occurred to me that like a meeting that could have been an email, perhaps this is maybe the presentation that could have been a memo. So I will be as brief as I can. This is relating to an issue that we just want to bring some awareness to you as mayor and council that this change has occurred. It's very fresh and new, a change that the Missouri General Assembly has passed and the governor has signed. We really have probably more questions than answers at this time, but it could change some of the situation around annexations and how we determine what the electric service territory is upon annexed property at that time. So in case those changes happen, we want to make sure that the council and the mayor have an understanding of what has changed and maybe why some of those things will be changing moving forward. Excuse me. So the General Assembly, as I mentioned, has passed a number of amendments to the state statutes that are intended to allow for increased competition for electric service, even within city limits where there is a municipally run electric utility like we have here in the city of Nixa. It also makes it to where previously it was the case that if you had a structure in the city of Nixa that was served by another utility, that could stay that way until that structure was demolished, and then when you rebuilt, you had to connect to a Nixa Electric. The new state statutes changed that so that the existing electric utility can continue to serve that structure permanently, even if it is demolished and rebuilt. So that's something new that hasn't been that way before. They also, to the Nixa utility's benefit, changed the definition of fair and reasonable compensation, for which if the city utility decides to acquire a property from another utility's electric service area. Previously, you had to pay 400% of the prior year's profits from that property in order to do that, in order to make that possible. And they've now lowered that from 400% to 200%, so it reduces the cost to obtain additional electric service territory, which, Doug, do you have to get the PSC's approval to do that?
We do not, because we're not regulated, but if it is a regulated utility, they do.
Okay. So that's a negotiated thing that apparently doesn't require apologies, I'm also a little bit outside of my lane on this one too, so Doug is available to answer questions. Municipalities can also collect sales tax and franchise fees from these new providers if they do come into the city limits, so it explicitly authorizes that. The practical implications of this are that newly annexed property into the city is no longer guaranteed that they will be a Nixa Electric customer from this point forward. The state has opened that up potentially to competition. The competition is not the default position, but it is possible now where it wasn't possible before. The property owners and or the developer who's buying the property and or people who rent the property and don't even own it, now they all are in the driver's seat in determining who the electric provider will be. Whereas before it was just pretty much a guarantee that Nixa Electric would be the provider on annexed property. The cities are also prohibited from allowing the property owner's determination on that subject from affecting their decision to annex or from offering other utilities. So my initial take on this was, well, we'll just say, hey, if you want to be in the city or if you want city water and sewer, you got to take the electric too in order to protect our ability to grow our service territories together, but the state has prohibited us from doing that. And it also puts us in a position where we are competing where we weren't before, which could shape future decisions that we make. On the procedural end of things, right now it appears from my reading, and I discussed this with the city attorney a little bit as well, it appears that our annexation procedures will proceed as they normally would. There just may be some other things going on in the background that occur that don't necessarily play out within that process of having public hearings and coming to meetings and holding votes. So here's what this could potentially look like in the future. First, somebody would file a petition for annexation just like they normally would, but then 45 days from before the date that the council would vote, or actually it would be the date that the mayor would sign the ordinance annexing that property, the owner or the developer or somebody who is a electric paying customer on that property could submit a written request to the city council that would invoke a mandatory 45-day negotiation period between Nixa Electric and another eligible electric provider that is within the vicinity of that property. That opens up a 45-day negotiation period where we could negotiate a service territory agreement between us, or we could mutually agree to have the PSC do it for us, which I think is highly unlikely, or we can not come to an agreement, right? And at the end of that 45 days, if we haven't reached an agreement on who's going to provide what, the decision then falls to the property owner, the same people who submitted the request. So all the utilities involved would submit to them a proposal, basically make them a pitch, and they get to pick which one they want to go with. And again, the council is prohibited from using that decision or using their preference against them in any sort of way regarding the annexation decision or decision to provide other utilities. So that's why I say the annexation process from this point forward probably does not need to accommodate either one of these 45-day windows. We would just proceed as normal because we're not really allowed to think about it anyways. Here's my kind of hot take on this, since we've not been through it before. It's totally new. I don't know that any municipal-owned electric utilities have performed an annexation under these new statutes yet. So I think it's potentially good for annexing petitioners in the short term because they'll have more choice. That's not a bad thing. They'll have choice in the matter where they didn't before. Like I said, not necessarily a bad thing for them, but potentially problematic for the electric utilities and for municipalities moving forward. One of the major concerns that we have with this is that as you would increase the number of service providers within our municipal limits, within our corporate boundaries, you're not only clogging up the right-of-way with more infrastructure, but you're creating what is probably a higher cost environment for capital improvements. As you invite more utilities into those spaces, those are more utilities that have to potentially be relocated or navigated around as we perform our own capital improvements, which tends to drive up costs. I come from a community where we did not have municipal electric. I wish we had. It's much better here in Nixa that we do. And what we ran into frequently was capital improvement costs that were increased because we had to do so much interagency and interjurisdictional coordination, particularly on the electric. That was such a bear to deal with. We don't have that problem here in Nixa. Unfortunately, these statutes could potentially put us in that position where our capital improvement costs go up in order to negotiate and coordinate with these additional utilities being within our city limits. The injection of competition, I think, could drive innovations. Competition tends to have that effect, but only when that competition is injected into a market where the market is secure, the market allows for free transactions, that the market is appropriately regulated but not overly regulated. I have no reason to believe that the market in which This competition is taking place as one of those markets, like we enjoy when we go out and shop. This is not that, right? That new entrants are not allowed into the market. You're just dealing with market participants that are already there. So a lot of questions there. I'm not saying that this goes good or goes bad. This is just my kind of initial reaction. But it will most certainly cause some confusion moving forward. I can guarantee you that. So again, just wanted to make an awareness of this change in case this happens during one of our annexations in the future, so that you guys know what's happening and why it's happening and how this thing may shape decisions moving forward. So, thank you.
Any questions? So we would still have control of the city right-of-ways. So we could make sure that they weren't putting poles down the middle of a place where we had decided to put a road in the future or something along those lines.
Well, yes, we will have control over the right-of-ways, but we would need to franchise another utility in order to exercise probably what I would consider to be full control over that. I don't really know. I don't know that we would be in a position to dictate things like pole location, and it's more likely they would be in an easement outside of our right-of-way.
So there's a right-of-way management statute that we have to consent to utilities to be in the right-of-way. That's the General Assembly saying that they have final control over the rights-of-ways which are held in public trust, and they have mandated that we have to consent to that, and we have some control under those statutes on location. So you can't put a pole in the middle of a road, but you have to consent to them being there. So we do have limited control over that, but there is a statute that would govern that.
Okay. Or the developer could sell additional right-of-way that's outside of our right-of-way and just double the usage of land for right-of-way if they decide.
Well, or grant whatever utility it is an easement. They can do that too. A lot of private utilities have their own easements.
Okay.
When a property owner does this, do they have the option to change at any point, or is it they pick and that's who they have perpetually?
That's a really good question. I don't know that the statutes determine that.
I assume we'd have the opportunity to buy them out again at a future time based off that 200, what used to be 400%, which is now 200%.
I believe that would be possible. Whether the property owner could initiate and basically shop around again at some point,
Right.
I don't know. You go back to the 45-day. Oh,
Basically, what it would do is if, say, a collective in a subdivision, or maybe it was an industrial park or whatever, wanted to switch, someone, either the city or those customers, would need to revert back to, like the mayor said, that 200%, where they would basically pay to buy that part of the utility out and allow the other utility to take over.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Move on to our next presentation. Mr. Colvin. Aren't you supposed to be in Mexico this week?
Pardon?
Senator supposed to be in Mexico this week?
I would
Is the
like
week
to
you usually
be in
go to Mexico?
I would like to be in Mexico this week. Pardon? Oh. No, I needed to be here this evening. Our consultant was not able to be with us this evening, so I'm going to do my best attempt at presenting his PowerPoint for you. I did take the liberty of adding a couple of slides that I thought might help the discussion a little bit towards the end. But anyway, this was completed by Toth and Associates. It's a cost of service study, which we have done to determine, future rates. As Ms. Evans said, we haven't raised electric rates since 2017, and so we've held flat, which is actually, that's pretty monumental in itself that we've been able to do that. So, and I don't believe that, once we get through this presentation, I don't believe I'm going to scare you off about the information that's in this either. Rate study elements. Revenue requirement, of course, is it's the required revenue to cover all of our operations and maintenance, as well as any growth, capital improvements that need to take place. Cost allocation, of course, determines where the the cost comes from in the various components. In other words, and I don't mean where the cost comes from as far as where we buy transformers. The different levels of customers that we have put different stresses on the system, and so therefore there's some cost allocation involved there as well. Rate design is basically the design of the rate structure to get you to a certain revenue, back to the top, to get you to the revenue that you need, and it's done so, and doing so at an equitable rate across the different classes. Of course, the revenue requirement, fortunately, we only have to fill 3 of these boxes to get the revenue requirement because we're debt-free. Obviously, we take into consideration our capital budgets, our operating budget, and the cash reserves that will be for future capital investment. And it's also, those cash reserves are also there in case of emergency. The cost of service, as I mentioned before, this is the main reason to do this is to match the cost of providing the service to the customer classes and design rates equitably to cover the cost across all of those different classes. And we'll get into that in a little bit more as we go through this. Considerations, of course, maintain revenue adequacy, fair and equitable cost, practical rate and billing formats. As you may or may not have known in the past, we've had some pretty crazy billing formats. You could have 3 or 4 tiers depending on how much power you used. The idea here is to simplify that. It makes it easier, one, for the utility, but it also makes it easier for the customer as well, for them to understand what their billing is. Oh, I hit that twice, sorry. Our customer count, now keep in mind, we've used, to do this, Craig did, was put together a pro forma year. It's based roughly on the 2020 actuals. However, there'll be a little bit of differences. So you really can't take these numbers and look back at the 2020 and it'll be exact. It's going to be off a little bit because we're trying to project. We have roughly 10,650 electric customers. That's meters. We have 9,675 of those are residential. So as you can see, we're very heavily weighted towards the residential side. Now, this is back to that test year consumption, and basically the way the usage took place is you'll see, similar to that graph that you saw, of the 150 to 60,000 kilowatt or million kilowatt hours that we actually sold, 95 million of those went to the residential side. The small commercials was in 18.7 million, 36 million for large commercial, and then of course there's security lighting, which quite honestly is a very small amount. The blue line represents the average use of those customers across that year. So of all the residential customers throughout the entire year divided by 12 months, that average was around 830 kilowatt hours. So as you can see, the industrial is considerably higher at 62,844. And if anybody has any questions while I'm going through this, please just
So
shout out and let me know.
large commercial, would that include, like the vinegar plant,
Yes, sir.
Walmart?
Yes, sir.
Places like that?
And yes, and in part of this slide, or most of this, what we've done is we've grouped that large commercial and industrial together. We only have a couple of customers that are truly industrial, so we've grouped them in with the large commercial. And basically, those are customers that have a demand of over 150 kW. So,
This kind of goes back to Mr. Kern's comments before about investment in economic development, and that's one of the reasons is so that we get more of those big customers because they're easier to take care of and buy
that's
more
absolutely
power,
right.
right?
That's absolutely right. If we can, doing economic development to bring on those larger customers, it helps spread out the cost. Not necessarily, it does help you in the bulk buying. More importantly, though, it spreads out all the rest of the distribution cost across a wider number of kilowatt hours. So it helps that quite a bit. Our test year expenses, now this is basically just purchase power cost. As you can see, we've got several components to purchase power. There's the demand charges, energy, transmission, and then, of course, the wholesale power cost itself, which those are the actual kilowatts that burn the light bulbs. In our test year, you can see the expenses, 10 million, 10.8 million. The forecasted expense, where we have saved a lot of money in some contract changes we've done, of course, is in the demand charges. That's it's virtually cut in half. But what we're showing here is roughly a 15.5% decrease in those costs. In the test year, we have a total kilowatt purchased of 171 million, and then we sold, of course, 150.7, which I mentioned a minute ago. And in the bottom, you can see here where the power cost per kilowatt hour is broken out, and that's basically just taking those purchased amounts or sold amounts and divided them against the purchase power, and that's basically what gives you that wholesale cost itself. In the forecasted expense, of course, you can see that it reflects the roughly a cent difference in the lowering of those expenses. This goes a little farther in that it provides the revenue for the 2020. What's showing here is 2021 is actually its usage from that test year. Of course, it's with our current 2021 rates, but we don't have a full year, so we're using the 2021 as a test year. And you can see where revenue from the different classes that we have, residential, the revenue is anticipated to be 13.27 million. With the rate structure that's put together here that Craig has come up with, the 2022 would make an adjustment back. Because we've had considerable amount of savings, the idea is to give some of those back, get us recentered back at a base to provide, to get some of that back to the customer. And then we would reset and watch how expense increases and those types of things would ramp up over the future years. And it'll take a number of years, obviously, to get back to where we are today. So what you can see here is he's showing basically a decrease, and we'll get into this in more detail later, but it's the decrease in the revenue. He's showing a decrease in revenue on the residential side that could be made at $2 million for the residential side, another $1 million for small commercial, and roughly it gets to $1.5 million all the way down until you get to the security lighting, of course, and that's an increase that I'll explain in just a little while. Here's a expense breakdown by year. Now, this doesn't include non-operating income. It's basically just for our operational income. The electricity purchased, of course, is the top line. That's the most expensive thing that we buy. That's day in and day out. That's where the cost is actually purchasing the wholesale power that we turn around and sell to our customers. Distribution expenses are the red line, and as you can see, there's projected numbers going down in the 2021 year. I'll be honest, I'm not sure how Craig came up with the number for the 2021. That was a pretty significant drop from 2020 to 2021. Other than, if the wholesale power is split out of that, it's kind of hard to see how that dropped that much, because he doesn't have capital in there. In any event, what he's showing, based on the pro forma year, that it drops. So that probably relates back to the pro forma year, and I'm sorry, I wish I could explain that a little better. Of course, the green line, of course, is the capital expenses, and those are projected out based on our 5-year master plan that we're in the middle of right now. And the fee in lieu of taxes is pretty much unchanged. That's just a simple allocated fund, 5% fee in lieu of taxes. So in other words, if another utility was serving us. The cash basis income statement summary, we're basically, again, showing the differences between the test year and 2020 using 2021 numbers and then on through 2025. The blue, of course, are the revenues. You can see there's a considerable increase in revenue in 2021 because by 2021, we are realizing the full savings of the wholesale cost changes that we made. We made some In 2019, we reduced some of our transmission cost a little bit. In 2019, 2020, we reduced a number of things. And then, of course, now in 2021, we'll have the full year on those savings, aside from February when we had that cold snap in February and we had a considerable cost for that. So because we're utilizing a test year, that anomaly doesn't really show up here. Net change in position, of course, because the revenue is so high and the expenses are down, obviously the net change in revenue in 2021 shows to be considerable, and then it flattens out over future years after we've leveled out the rate.
So how do we know what the future years are gonna be, what the rates are gonna be in the future years? I mean, because from what I'm looking at, I see that, we looked at 2020, where I'm assuming we used a lot more power because people were at home in the residential, and so we had to buy more power, cost for it. Also, we're in a situation where people are working again, they're out of their homes more. So also the cost of the electricity, the power has come down this year versus last year. Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
That's correct.
So how are we to know what it's gonna do in the future?
As far as the wholesale power?
Correct.
One of the things that makes this a little easier on the wholesale power side is we've locked up multi-year contracts. Okay? The only fluctuation that we would see in the wholesale power is increases by federal hydropower, because they are by the Department of Energy, and they have some parameters. They haven't increased their rates in, I think we're in the 9th year in a row. They haven't done anything with their rates, and typically they don't until they show a cost of service need over 2%. And that's 2% in each year. That's not a cumulative, which is kind of crazy, but that's the way they do it. But the demand, and then of course demand charges, the demand charges are fixed. The wholesale energy is fixed to a certain point. We do have a little bit of wholesale energy that we purchase that's exposed to the market. So in other words, across the entire part of the year, it's pretty easy for us to say we're going to use 15 megawatts of energy every day, all the way across the year. So we buy a base load of that, and then there are some months where we just barely get over the 15, and then there's some months, like in the summertime, where we may need 30. All of that's exposed to the market cost. And then we've done some things. We will, in the summertime, we'll hedge some other firm numbers to try to combat any spikes that would take place. So that's kind of that's the reason we can see that wholesale costs stay fairly flat. The only other anomaly is the transmission cost. Transmission costs are regulated by FERC, and of course, though we have a voice in that, those tend to be going up, and I don't see them coming down anytime soon. And the reason I don't is because, like underwater or like underground utilities across the nation and bridges, you've heard about infrastructure and it's old. Electric's the same way. We've got a lot of deficiencies in our infrastructure on the national grid, and people use a lot more power today than they did when most of that was built in the 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So,
I think on that previous slide, you had increases to the distribution costs.
yes.
Yeah, were built.
Yeah.
Some sort of percentage increase was built into
Right.
that, yeah.
And that was the other thing, and when we're looking at this, we're also looking at our cost, obviously, and we'll take an average and stick it in there. Now we've got an anomaly like this year, and then you'll see in a little while where we're seeing some cost increases, 15 up to as high as 30 and 40% for some items. So it's been crazy on what some of the items are, but for the general across the board, we typically use a multiplier of 1% or 2%.
Sorry, Doug, while you're on that slide, I was going to have you go back to that anyway. I know you were going to check with Craig on the capital expenses, on why that's flat from 22 on.
Right.
Have you had a chance to check with Craig on why that?
No, yes, and he was going to get me a new slide. I think he probably just didn't have the time to get it to me. But when you look at his total numbers are correct. Okay. It's just that he took 22 through 25, and he took that total number of those projects outlaid in the 5-year master plan, he just divided them by 4 and just laid it in there, when actually And the way our cash is, as long as we have a good enough cash balance, which we should, we'll be able to meet that. And at the end of the 2025 year, we're going to be virtually in the same space. It's just not going to be a flat line like that from 22 to 25. Does that make sense?
It's $1 million 1 year instead of $200,000 for 5 years.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And there again, because of the cash reserves we have, we're in good shape to be able to do that. And of course, projecting these rates out will also take care of that, or it should. If it doesn't, we'll be back up here again. Cost of service summary at present rates. This is where it shows at our current rates, this is where the cost of service comes into play. Our total revenue, of course, we've kept the colors the same. The blue is the total revenue portion. The total expenses are the pink color. And then the change in net position is at the top. Now this is just for, you know, the pro forma year. And you can see where those how those change across the small commercial, large commercial, security lighting. We've got this for each of the years. So looking at the proposed 2022 rates that has been proposed here, you'll see a significant drop. And the other thing to look for is, like I mentioned earlier, we talked about how those costs are equitable across the different classes, where those costs come from. You can see, you'll watch that blue bar, and you'll see where those numbers are. There's a little more cost involved in the large commercial, and that goes back to that demand that I was talking about. Small commercial is not quite as much. Of course, residential is fairly flat. Where you're seeing what looks like a huge increase or a spike, and you got to remember, security lighting, it's a very small piece of this whole thing. So the numbers there are very small, but it certainly makes the graph go up. We are way behind on recovering our costs from our security lighting. Basically, 23, 24 the same. If you look at these graphs, they almost don't even move other than the actual numbers themselves. But as far as the shape of them, they pretty well stay the same all the way through. So
Just
go
quick
ahead.
question. What is the definition of security lighting?
Security lighting are rental lights, not street lights, okay? The street lights, the city picks up the cost for those. Security lighting are actually where someone wants to have a light in their backyard. We've got a pole line that goes through there, and we stick a light out there for them, and they actually rent that by the month, okay?
Okay.
And that's on the residential side. We don't do any of the parking lot lighting or anything like that. We don't rent any of that stuff, so. Back to what we talked about a while ago, the rate design itself, here again, this is how we develop rates to adequately cover the revenue requirements. And they're accomplished by, you know, the suitability of the rate form, which we talked about, design the cost of service rates, examine the cost of service rates on the individual customers, which will give you some examples of those, and then design practical, you know, rate structures. If necessary. We're not quite ready for those yet, where we get to a point where we would do doing time changes. In other words, we would do off-peak and on-peak rates. We aren't moving into any of that yet. At some point when we have AMI and we start seeing some more fluctuations, we might move over to that. And then, of course, examine those alternatives. So we've been working through all of these. So here's where, this is a summary of the existing rates, which is 2021, currently in the 2021 column. Now, there's 2 pages to this. There's residential and large commercial, and then we've got some others on another page. What is proposed here is to change the monthly service availability from $10 to $15. However, we're going away from the first 1,000 kilowatt hour and the excess, the 2-tiered rate structure right here, and moving it to a flat rate. So in other words, it doesn't matter if it's your first kilowatt hour or your 10,000 kilowatt hour. It's the same price for that piece of energy, which reflects how we buy it. We don't buy it once we go over a certain amount, the price drops. We buy, it's all the same price. So What has been shown, what he's showing here, and that you'll find this across all of the classes, is a reduction in the kilowatt hour rate. There's a slight increase in the service availability, a reduction in the kilowatt hour rate, and then in the 23, 24, 25 years, he's put a 1% increase in there. What we'll be looking at is, like I mentioned, we've had some significant savings, and so we would drop the price of power for the first year. And then from there, that gets us set to where we're actually recovering the cost like we should be. And then as we have increases of cost, then that 1% would reflect those increases in cost. Very similar to what we do in the water and electric side, or water and wastewater side. And then here's the industrial piece. We didn't change the primary power service availability charge. That's a fairly new, we didn't put that one in until, I think it was 2017, 2018 when we actually created the primary power rate. And so we left those the same. One of the things we did do that you will notice is on the demand charge, we used to have 3 different demands. As you can see on the large commercial at the bottom, the demand there was $6.50. The demand on the industrial was $7.75. The demand on the primary was $8.75. Much like the kilowatt hours, the demand's the same price. It cost us the same price, no matter if it's 1 kilowatt of demand or 10,000 kilowatts of demand. So we've leveled those out and got those all to where they're equitable across each of the ones. This is the sheet that also reveals what I was talking about on the bottom line, the security lighting. This would take us from $8.70 a month to $15 a month. That's a pretty drastic increase, but we're still cheaper than anybody around. The next closest one to us is Ozark at $15.75. So we finally got that one adjusted up where it should be. To give you a couple of comparisons, this particular slide shows, if you look particularly at the third column, which is the kilowatt hour usage, those are just number of highlighted kilowatt hours that someone may use during the month. On our residential side, if you remember that slide from earlier, I think it said that the average was 863. That was on the pro forma year. I think the average is closer to 1,000, between 1,000 and 1,100. Based on that, what we would see is a revenue decrease in that residential service of about 17% for that first year. Now, of course, then it would obviously change up from there. Now, percentages have always been a hard number for me to swallow because it doesn't really show you the actual dollar amount we're talking about. 17% is huge. $25.72 is huge. Typically, when you're at the smaller amounts, though, it doesn't mean very much at all. We do have some customers, obviously, on the smaller amounts. As you can see, Craig put together some average number of customers. The nearest I can tell, because I didn't get to talk to him about it, was, he took the total billings for the year and just divided it back, and that's how he came up with those numbers. And he's pretty confident that, it's pretty well spread out like that. So in other words, he's showing that we would have 966 bills sometime through the entire year across all the residential that would use 104 kilowatts, or that number would use 539 kilowatts, is what he's showing there. Small commercial, these are single phase, very similar in that most of those will use between the 1264 and the 2000. We have a number of them that'll use in the 3,000 and 4,000 range. The majority of them, though, are pretty small. They don't use a whole lot more than your average residential customer. The revenue difference there, of course, again, is in the teens, as is the small commercial 3-phase. The other cost component that I want to explain, or try to explain, we currently have what's called an FCA in our ordinance. And what that is a fuel cost adjustment, and it was put in to mirror a fuel cost adjustment that we received each month on our billing for our wholesale power from City Utilities of Springfield. So when that implemented, we basically put a formula in our rates that said, we will take that number and we'll just flip it, turn it around to our customers, which is what we've been doing all this time. Of course, we just recently severed our contract with CU. We don't have that contract anymore. However, what we plan to do is do an energy cost adjustment that would just be for Nixa's wholesale power cost. So what that would do is it helps buffer those in-between times. Say we're at 1% increase for the next 3 years. The safety net would be the ECA adjustment if we saw a spike in those transmission costs until we could come back and readjust it. So an energy cost adjustment formula, you know, it captures potential cost changes realized from wholesale power. It has nothing to do with any of our other operations and maintenance costs. It's strictly the wholesale power. So it's the demand, the transmission, the energy, those items there. ECA is computed annually, and we list it on the billing separately. If you'll notice, if you know your bill, you've seen that for the last 5, 6, 7 years. That's been a negative number. It's been a credit. With the way we've reduced our rates, we'll zero that out and just start with a flat zero ECA and then let it take care of itself. So if we see some changes up in wholesale power in the future, you might see that number jump, and I'll give you an example. It works the same way the other way around. If we can do a good job and maybe lower those rates even a little bit more, it may go to a credit, and we would base that on a kilowatt hour. You had a question?
So was that fuel adjustment calculated in those previous numbers that you showed us as what the test year was?
No, sir.
So that fuel adjustment back to it was not calculated in that?
Well, it was accounted for as far as total revenue. It was accounted for that.
Okay.
But it wasn't separated out.
And so knowing that we're not going to have that, did that show up as far as the next few years that you calculated out?
Yeah, it was included as a negative in the revenue that we're currently
Right.
getting.
And it was
at zero now.
It was a
And
zero.
what we would do would zero it out.
Okay.
Because the way we're lowering the rates, we can bring the rates into where they should be and leave that as a flat number. So here's an example. Say the cost of power is 5.397 cents. That's our wholesale cost. Time we take, which we saw from that other slide, all of those costs of wholesale power and divide it by the total amount of kilowatt hours. And the next year's cost, it actually rose to 5.5 cents, or 5.12, or a difference of 0.0012. How the formula would work is basically you take the kilowatt hours used. So say you used 1,000, or in this particular instance, I gave it 985. You use 985 times the 0.12. Your ECA adjustment on the bill would be $1.18. And that $1.18 would hang there for a year until we got around to doing the next one. So that's basically how an ECA will work, and that formula will be part of the ordinance that would be presented to you at some point in the future on how we would do that. So that's the end of his presentation. I think Craig has done a very good job. I would hate to have to put the spreadsheet up here. I don't know how many tabs it is. I didn't even count them all. I'm not sure I could count that far. But it's very thorough. It's probably the most thorough cost of service study I've seen since I've been here. So we do have some very good numbers. I guess I'm to the point where, do you have any more questions? I think the intent for us in the future would be to bring you a rate ordinance based on what you would like to see. Currently, we could put together a rate ordinance based on what this proposal is and let you give it some thought, or if you want, we can wait and come back maybe at your next meeting and you can give us some direction if you'd like to change it before we even bring it to you. It's up to you, but I'm here for any questions and to take any direction you want to give me.
Can you go back to the rate page, rate slide? One of the residential probably is the one we care about. Yeah, that one.
This page or the one that broke down? This one here? I'm not sure which one you wanted, I'm sorry. This one would show the actual rate numbers.
Yeah, the actual rate's good.
So that's the one that shows where we would change the service availability from $10 to $15, but we would lower the kilowatt hour rate to 9.9937 cents, and that would be flat across all kilowatt hours.
Any questions?
Do we still owe anything on the buyout of the previous contract?
We do not.
That was all, okay.
That's all
I
been
thought that
taken
was all
care of,
taken
yes.
care of. I just,
Yes.
thank you.
It's been many years in the making. That's been on for a while. Go to, not sure which slide it is. One of the slides has the percentage change in rates for each one, maybe like that.
Oh, wait a minute, the one, that one?
That one, I think that's the one I was thinking, yeah. That's not, yeah, so that's pretty close.
This one just doesn't show the current rate.
It doesn't show the
This just-
breakdown by different, yeah.
Right, this one is just based on if you use those rates on the different classes, this would be the revenue, the anticipated revenue they would make.
Right. So that 2022 column would be kind of the decrease in rates for
That's
each one
correct.
of those individual.
That's correct. That's the decrease in the revenue. Yeah.
15.5% decrease for residential. It kind of skews weird because of the way we changed the rates and the service tier where you have to pay 50 instead of 10 for the base
Yeah.
service.
And this is based on the entirety of that class. It's not an individual rate, but the entirety of that class. This is talking about the decrease in actual revenue that we would realize.
The other slide had more of a breakdown based on
Yeah, go to the-
usage.
Yeah, the slide that had the 10 different brackets in it. That one, yeah.
This is the one, yeah, this one that shows some comparisons of some example usages.
Can we get a copy of that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Can we post that on the, and Garrett's presentation as well on the agenda? Yeah, well, the item was posted, but
Okay, I'll see
a
it.
link to the presentations wasn't posted.
Yes, it wasn't, I didn't even have it all completely ready until.
Yeah, it wasn't available.
Until this morning.
They weren't
We
posted
can do that,
because
we
they
can do
weren't
that
available.
afterwards, so if someone wants
But
to go
yes,
on and
we
look at
can,
it.
we can
look at it.
attach this
Yeah, okay.
to that,
Oh,
so
yeah,
you
we
can
can
go
add
back and look at it.
I'm
And then-
pretty sure I went cross-eyed for a second.
Also, Mayor and Council, Doug did a fantastic job,
Yep.
so nothing to take away from that. But we can also still have Craig come back in the future if you'd like him to dive in
I
a
think-
little deeper.
I think
we
that'd be
can
good.
do
I know
that as
you
well.
just couldn't make it to this meeting or the next meeting,
Correct.
so to
Right.
make it by the end of the year to get everything
Sure,
done,
we
we
could
had to
definitely
get something
have him
going.
come in. He'd be willing to do that, for sure.
So why don't we, like Doug was saying, we'll get everybody a copy of the presentation, then we can review it, and then we'll have a discussion, another discussion next, and then we can bring back the ordinance, and we should still be able to get it done by the December.
Yep.
By the end.
Yep.
And
so
in the
we can get it
meantime,
in
if you have any
place.
questions, don't hesitate, email me, call me.
And hopefully we
Will do.
can have them come at one of those meetings, one of those 3 meetings.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Colvin.
All right, we will take a 5-minute recess, and then we will come back and start on the ordinance.
was saying really to you.
Drew turned my, they turned my mic back on. Thank you, Drew. Okay. As soon as Becca's ready, we will move on to the ordinance section. Okay, we'll move on to the ordinance section. First reading, please, bill number 2021-0103.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-103, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the mayor to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the 38th Judicial Circuit of the State of Missouri for the funding, hiring, and maintaining of a court clerk and the transfer and storage of municipal court files.
Mayor, Council, back in September, Council voted to move the Nixa Municipal Court over to the 38th Judicial Circuit Court, in other words, the Christian County Circuit Court. As part of that, I just want to also mention that Ozark recently made the same change as well, and so they're in the process of transferring their courts. We hope to have ours transferred by January 1st. But during that, as I think I mentioned last time during the last presentation, there was some concern by the Christian County Circuit Clerk, Barb Stillings. She expressed some concern over the increase of caseload between Nixa and Ozark and the lack of personnel that she has in her office to be able to handle that caseload. She has asked, along with Judge Johnson, that we consider entering into a interagency degree, I can't talk right now, intergovernmental agreement between the City of Nixa and the Christian County Court to pay for half of a position. So the idea would be that Nixa would pay for half, Ozark would pay for half, and then that individual would be able to handle the caseload of both Ozark and Nixa. Nick has been working with Judge Johnson and Barb Stillings on coming up with the intergovernmental agreement that we have before you tonight. You can see in my notes there that the amount for 2022 would not exceed $23,833.20. That would cover the cost of the salary and benefits for one additional person. Now, Ms. Stillings has also requested that both cities consider hiring that person before January 1st. That way that she can spend some time training that individual and they'll be ready to go by January 1st whenever the City of Nixa's cases hits her office. So we did include in the agreement an amount not to exceed $2,948.45. That would cover the salary and benefits for that individual, basically from next council meeting, because that's when the ordinance would actually be officially adopted or approved if council would elect to do so. So it would cover those salaries and benefits from that period till December 31st for the remainder of the year. I can tell you that we can absorb the $2,948 in the current court budget, so we wouldn't have to do a budget amendment to make that happen. So this is a one-year agreement. The idea there being that at the end of every year we can evaluate the need to see if the need is still there for the clerk's office, because the state does do an evaluation of that office every year and looks at the caseload that office did the prior year to determine whether or not they're going to award that office another position through the state. So we can then evaluate that again the following year to see if the state did indeed give them a position, and if so, we could then terminate our contract at that point. Staff does recommend the approval of the ordinance allowing the mayor to execute the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Nixa and the Christian County Circuit Court. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I have a question that might require a little speculation, but during your conversations on this, and obviously there's we can review it at 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys, do you think that one person will be fine? Or is this well, let's just see if we need to add more, one person might work? And you know the difference, and one person might work, we might have to add another one, or one person will definitely work, we won't need any more than that. So are we gonna have to review this halfway through the year and add another person, or?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that would require a little bit of research. With the conversations that I've had with Judge Johnson and Barb Stillings, I think that one person would be sufficient. But in saying that, I'm not familiar with Ozark's caseload as well as I am the City of Nixa's caseload, so I still reserve the right to come back and address that. But I can definitely reach out to them and kind of verify that if they are confident that one person would be okay.
Okay. I think it'd be better to know now going into, well, especially doing budgeting, but
sure,
if there's a chance, we might have to.
I know from our standpoint, from the City of Nixa's caseload, I think one person would be fine, but again, I don't know Ozark's. But I'll reach out and have an answer by next meeting.
Thank you.
In conversations with Barb, she'd also said they have some capacity currently with their staff that they have a little bit of extra capacity.
Gotcha.
Well, and they're also getting the court cost from this as well, right? The court fees will go to
They have
help.
to pay that back to they pay those to the state, and the state gives them a portion of them back. So they won't
Right.
get any extra money until next year,
Oh,
the
the following year.
2023 or
Okay.
whatever.
Which is why we made it a one-year contract, so we can see where they're at.
Evaluate.
That's
Back around.
Okay.
Okay.
So for 2022, we're looking at 2388, 3320
Yes.
as our cost.
correct. And that is already incorporated in the budget that we presented to council, and you'll see again tonight.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jimmy.
You bet.
We will open up the public hearing if anyone would like to speak to this item. And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All right, thank you very much. Move on to first reading Bill 2021-104.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-104, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending Chapter 2, Article 2 of the Nixa City Code to establish new city council districts based on the 2020 decennial census.
Drew, do you mind to bring up the same PDF that had my previous presentation? Thank you. As you're all aware, this Nixa City Charter requires that after every decennial census, the city go through a process of redistricting, the purpose of which is to make sure that all three of Nixa's council districts have roughly equal population, the goal there being to adhere to the legal principle of political equality represented as one person, one vote. So this is the process that we have to go through now. If you recall, I gave a presentation, it's probably been a little over a month ago now, about what that process looks like and a couple of options that staff had put together to satisfy the requirements of the charter, the city code, state statutes, and some constitutional requirements that all come together into what's packaged together as this list of 7 criteria that are listed in order of priority. And so these are the criteria that staff used to create those options that we presented to the council. We created a subcommittee which did meet on September 20th to explore those options further and to discuss them, which the subcommittee did. I want to thank the subcommittee members for their time and for making that possible. I thought that was an important step that we took and ultimately recommended to the council the proposal that you will see here in just a moment. This is a depiction of our current state, and as you can see, the District 1 population vastly outnumbers the other 2 districts, which is something that we need to correct. And what it means practically is that District 1 must shrink and the other 2 must grow. In order to make all this happen, you've got to do a little bit of math. Our ideal district population after the 2020 census is a little bit over 7,700 people. So that's kind of the target we're shooting for, but at the same time trying to make sure we also can hit on all of those other 6 criteria that I had on the screen before. So I can go back and forth here. This is, again, the current district arrangement, and then what we're recommending, and there are the population totals and the percent deviation total. I'm showing the percent deviation there because that's kind of a benchmark or target that the courts have put out there as, you know, if they're evaluating in litigation or lawsuit whether a city did a good enough job in hitting the population target. Generally speaking, the courts have said, Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that if you're within 10% of deviation, that's kind of where you want to be. And so that's why I put the percent deviation up here for a reference. The other option, the subcommittee members I'm sure will recall, was bumping right up against that 10% threshold. And so that I think had a lot to do with why staff recommended this option over the other. And I believe that, and the subcommittee members of course can speak for themselves, but I believe that also played into their decision as well. So again, this is the recommended district arrangement. It's also important that from a staff perspective that we also made the district lines somewhat intuitive because that's also an issue that is important, again, important to the county clerk. Our timing here is good in that thankfully we have been able to act fast enough that we will get this done to give the county clerk a sufficient amount of time to prepare for April elections, and we will also be getting this done prior to the deadline for the declaration of candidates for that same election. So this is really good timing on our part. Unfortunately, I don't think every city is going to be able to meet that same time frame, but I think everything going well over these next 2 readings, I think we will, and that'll be a good thing. So again, this is the recommendation, this is current and recommended. Happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Any questions? Thank you to the members of the subcommittee as well. Thank you. Thank you. We will open the public hearing. If you would like to speak to this, you can do so at this time. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Nope. Everybody good with this? Okay. Everybody still lives in their same district?
Yeah.
I was gonna
Amy's,
say-
I think, the only one that got close, right?
I'm going to say something. One of the things that we talked about was we could not take into our thinking is about how many subdivisions were going in these areas, because we had to go with what the census stated. As they said, even though you've got these subdivisions planned, they may or may not come into fruition or not. So
I
it's,
think we're done. That's kind of just happened
yeah.
anyway, because we do have several new subdivisions coming in the southeast and the northwest, or northeast and northwest, and then several in the south, and so that should kind of keep balanced out.
But at any rate, it's in 10 years, it's going to change remarkably again, I'm sure.
Who
but
knows, yeah,
that
we
was
don't
the
have any
best.
concept, right?
This made us more equal than the other choice we had, so
District 1 may go all the way to the river.
it may.
Gladly.
May have to add a fourth district.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll move on to second reading. Second reading, Bill 2021-01, or 101.
Second reading, Council Bill Number 2021-101, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending Chapter 20 of the Nixa City Code to modify several provisions of the city code related to the city's speed limit regulations.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. You'll recall that we had a pretty robust discussion about this bill at its first reading, which was on October 12th. Tonight, the bill is presented for second reading and final passage. And as we discussed at that prior meeting, this bill, if approved, would modify several sections of the Nixa City Code to address some issues we have with our speeding regulations, to put that on some firmer legal foundation and provide a process in which those established speed limits can be amended or added if we expand the city borders. I'm happy to address any comments that council may have about some of the particulars of those changes. And with that, staff would recommend approval.
Any questions? Nope. No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will open up the public hearing on this item.
My name's Ron Sanders, 976 Glen Oaks Drive. I spoke on this bill the last time it was brought up 2 weeks ago. And we're looking at handing speed limits to a non-elected official. We're going to have a non-elected official deciding how fast people can go, and I presume fines for those speed limits as well. I would like to strongly urge y'all to vote no on this particular ordinance until the ordinance has y'all voting on these speed limit changes or some other type of oversight. Because right now, the only thing that we have is a traffic engineer going to see the city clerk to make any changes. So right now, we the people will have to live with these speed limit changes, which are laws that will be changed and manipulated by a non-elected official. And to me, that goes against everything that our government stands for, that our government is constructed for. We should never have citizens who would face fines or any other type of punitive measures without first being voted on by the city council or by the legislative branch. That's just not how things should be done. I would urge y'all to vote no until that is fixed. When's the last time y'all voted on a speed limit change? I think it was like 10 years ago or something. So it would not be a big burden to the city council. And going by the recommendations of a traffic engineer may be fine, but ultimately, it would be y'all representing the people who would be making the final decision and voting yes or no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. This wouldn't be a change, this is the way we currently are doing this, right? Is that you or Travis or someone, we're just codifying what we're already doing.
Yeah, it seems like like we discussed last meeting in 2012, we did a recodification. There was an attempt to move towards this process, which is a process that's used throughout the state. And this is just codifying that so that it's more formal and on in my view, firmer legal foundation for enforcement.
And also the fines are set by ordinance, which would be voted on by the city council.
So there's a general penalty ordinance, it's section 1.9, but a lot of these are also controlled by state law. There's a violations bureau for speeding offenses, it's kind of tiered. I couldn't quote for those for you tonight, but it's from like 10 to 14, 15 to 19, and it goes up, and it's an incremental fee as.
That's held by the state.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
set by the state.
Okay. We'll leave open the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I do understand what Mr. Sanders is saying, and I do completely agree that we have to do what's right for the people. And that being said, someone who studies this, goes to school for it, is licensed in figuring out this stuff, and reading the reports, the traffic studies and all that, they're much more certified than I am to pick the speed limit. Because I can tell you my truck runs pretty good at a very high rate of speed. And 160, I would love to get through Nixa in about 2 minutes. But that's not right, and that would be dangerous, and Wheeler would pull me over. And letting us decide what the speed limits are, I mean, to me, and it's not a burden. Believe me, out of all the things that we do, that would be the probably the least amount of thing, because I wouldn't really have an educated guess on what to even set the speed limit at. Trusting people who specialize in certain things is what we do every day to do what's right for the people of the community. So I definitely have no issues with using someone that is their job. I mean, that's why I pay an electrician or pay a plumber. I'll just end up screwing something up when it comes to that stuff, but that's kind of where I see that's where I sit on that. I'm okay with it if you are.
I agree. Like I said, the city engineer or a traffic engineer would be a subject matter expert, but ultimately, y'all should have oversight. So, the recommendations of the city engineer or the traffic engineer, and then y'all would have oversight over that or supervision over the passing of those laws. That's the specific crutch that I have, and that's kind of how laws are made. I understand that the state has already set, limits on fines and everything, but ultimately, we should always mind that one rule that, we pass ordinances through the city council, especially whenever fines would be levied against citizens. And that would include changes to the laws and everything. That's my specific sticking point, and it should be an oversight thing.
So that brings up an interesting point, Mr. Woodman. So what if they came back with one road and everyone up here believed that it was 30 miles an hour too fast?
Well, so council cannot delegate their legislative power, and this is not what this is. This is creating a law and then empowering an administrative official to enforce it with a standard that they can apply, which is the traffic study and the public safety concern. I hate to bring it up, but I worked for a prior municipality where their council did, by ordinance, change some of those, did take back some of that power. So there are particular streets in Springfield that by ordinance, it's set by, or the speed limit is set by ordinance, and council will always have that power. What council gives, council can take away in this context. Interestingly, too, just to offer to council, some MoDOT routes are not approved by the General Assembly. The General Assembly has a generic statute that sets standard speed limits based on the classification of the street under a definition under statute. but then provides the Highway Commission the authority to modify that based off of engineering judgment and public safety concerns. So this model is followed throughout the state, and if council ever has an issue with it, they have the authority to modify that grant of power or just to remove it completely.
I also had a question as well. Looking through here, I mean, there's certain subdivisions, certain streets that already have the speed limits stated in this right here. So if somebody wanted to come in and say, hey, my neighborhood is too fast, can we get the city council to override it? Is that what you're saying, that we can do that?
Well, yeah, that would be something that could be done, yes. If a member of the public came to council in whatever fashion they choose to do that and requested a speed limit change, then the council would have the authority to establish that by ordinance.
And that was the original problem we were trying to resolve in 2012, I think, is we had certain streets where residents would come and complain it was too fast, and then we would change it, and then residents would come and complain it was too slow. We really had we didn't have like a traffic study or anything.
No
the public
scientific
complained, we
basis.
would go change the signs. The public would complain the other way, we would go change the signs back. And so by making it that we had these other requirements, it allowed us so that the city council didn't just have to get the complaint and not have any kind of information to go along with it.
Also,
wait.
And as we
There's
said,
more.
not every council will have a traffic engineer on there.
so let's imagine a perfect world where there are no speed limits. That's the theory that traffic engineers work off of, that people will drive what they feel safe driving. And so we approach it that way. When we look at a speed limit, the people driving that road decide currently what they're driving. The people have to say right now what they're driving. So when we look at that, we analyze what the people right now are driving. So we look at, and then we figure out what the 85th percentile is. And so we believe that 85% of the population that currently drives a road, and we'll look at that data, that existing speed data, to determine if they feel comfortable driving the set speed limit, if they feel comfortable driving above the set speed limit, or if they feel comfortable driving below that set speed limit. You have the 15% outliers who are likely high school students or people who just love to drive fast, but that 85th percentile is selected based on what people now are driving. So the people do choose the speed limit through that study. Yeah, so moving forward, I think a traffic engineer is never going to look at a roadway and be like, you should set it to this without looking at any data. They're not going to set it to 15 or whatever, just without looking at anything. They'll look at design speed. So what the engineers designed the road for, they'll look at, because we have curves on how the road moves, so your car doesn't fly off the edge. So we'll look at that, and then we'll also look at what people are comfortable driving. And with all of that data, we then decide a speed limit. So I'm actually doing a study in Lebanon right now. Not a speed study, but we're also looking at sight distance. And so MoDOT, in their engineering policy guide, sets out with this speed limit, you have to have a sight distance of X or whatever. One of the roads that we're looking at doesn't meet that. And so we're going to make the recommendation to the city, hey, it's 55 right now. There's a 45 mile per hour speed limit just north of this intersection. Let's send that south so people making a left turn to go north will comply with that sight distance, because currently they don't have it at the 55. And so MoDOT owns that road though, so now the city has that data. They're like, hey, here's what the sight distance should be. It's not that, so let's work with MoDOT, and then MoDOT would do that speed study and be like, okay, we'll confirm that. So yeah, I think traffic engineers, they work with the communities. They know the community super well. They're not going to do something that's arbitrary, that's ridiculous, I think, that's not based out of design speeds and just the data available. So.
Anything else?
I think Mr. Sanders was bringing the point that the data is fine, just that we need to have the oversight to say yes or no. And I would say to that this is something that is not in my purview, that I am not an expert in. I don't try to be an expert in. So therefore, I would go with whatever the recommendation would be. And so allowing them to do that does not weigh on me. So I'm okay with allowing them to make the decision.
As a legislative body, we give administrative power to people all the time. We give administrative power to Jennifer to do accounting because we don't want to be accountants. We give administrative power to Matt for something, I'm sure.
Christmas lights.
We give Garrett administrative power to approve or disapprove planning and zoning regulations. All of those have the effect of law, and all of those are things that we pass on to experts in those fields. Any other discussion? All right, motion to approve?
So made.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orr.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to second reading Bill 2021-102.
Second reading Council Bill Number 2021-102, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending Chapter 6, Article 1, Section 6-6 of the Nixa City Code to provide a defense for violations of such section.
So we give Matt poop. That's what we give Matt, right?
Yep. That's why I apologize. I'm working off my phone. My computer decided it was going too long tonight, and the battery died.
That will happen.
So yes, changing this section of city code would just clarify the violation as we believe that it was meant to be intended. And by doing that, as mentioned in our meeting 2 weeks ago, just a clarification that not immediately cleaning up and disposing of in a sanitary manner would hint that violation, instead of the act itself immediately triggering that violation. Which I believe would be how we would want to do that anyways. But as the dog park comes online, this clarification needs to be made to ensure that we're doing the right thing here. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
And we will open up the public hearing if anyone would like to speak to this ordinance. And we will, I apologize to my neighbor for my dog violating this ordinance on their yards. We will close the public hearing. Any further discussion?
So what do you do if you see, like, I live in a neighborhood, people walk their dogs all the time, and let them run loose all the time, too. So what would I have to do if I saw a dog walk in my yard and deposit something there to get them notified?
I believe this is city property is what this one refers to.
No, this
No,
is
I think
private property.
it's all general, I'm pretty sure,
general.
yeah.
Or private property. not
Technically,
mine.
if it's property not owned by the owner, and so it would go right away, city property or private property not owned. You could report that.
Okay.
Animal control or the police department would be your best case.
But you have to have proof, so you better take a picture of it.
Take a picture of them.
Pick it up.
No.
DNA testing, CSI.
It's great fertilizer.
Yes, I'd have to have a picture. Okay, I just wondered because people are going to ask what they do if this occurs. So.
I was gonna ask the same question.
So it's not a code enforcement issue. It's not a code enforcement issue. It would be an actual animal control or police issue. Okay. Okay. Everybody shakes their head yes. Any other discussion? Motion to approve?
So made.
Second. Good idea.
Roll call, please.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham.
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orr.
Yes.
Jared Giddens.
Yes.
And we'll move on to our resolution. Resolution 2021-107.
Resolution number 2021-107, a resolution of the Council of the City of Nixa accepting the proposal of Planetaria for services related to the city's website and authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract for same.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we are finally ready to bring you guys a contract with a company to provide the city with a new and improved website. or we certainly hope if everything goes according to plan. The city's current website needs to be redesigned and updated to provide a more user-friendly experience and more modern design. Currently, the city does not offer any App Store app for our citizens, and I think that's really the future of where city government services are going. They're going online and going into apps. Over 50% of our website users are mobile users. People expect now to be able to do things through an app, and we don't currently offer any. In the 5-year strategic plan under high performance government, action plans 10 and 11 state that the city shall redesign Nixa.com to be more functional, interactive, and user-friendly, and that the city shall design and utilize a city app which is integrated with the website. In the 2021 budget, we had set aside $50,000 for the cost of doing so, and on June 21st, we put out an RFP for website, app, and related software integrations. RFP outlined really thorough description of kind of the needs that we analyzed for every department and how we, what our vision is for digital city hall experience and presenting information in really kind of easily digestible ways for the public, so they really have a better understanding of what we do and how we do things. The city received 5 proposals. I cannot talk. 5 proposals by the deadline. A proposal scoring team made up of myself, the city administrator, finance director, and assistant city administrator read and reviewed the proposals and determined which vendors would be shortlisted for interviews. Keep scrolling. We did some further research with those. So of the 5 potential vendors, 3 were shortlisted. And those were Planetary Media, Jesse James Creative, and Granicus. Granicus is the company that we're currently with for our website. Each of the 3 proposals had unique capabilities and offerings and did not represent apples-to-apples bids, so it's not really comparing just who's providing the lowest cost, like when you're buying some piece of equipment. It's really about what are the specific capabilities of these softwares and these offerings, and really trying to compare things that were not directly related to each other. Each proposal, I kind of covered that. All department directors were then invited to participate in initial interview meetings with the 3 vendors, after which I had some follow-up meetings with those vendors as well to discuss further. We considered many factors when considering the proposals and sought to understand the full breadth of each vendor's recommended solutions. One of the key items we learned through this process is that really in order to accomplish what we want as far as a digital city hall experience for our customers, it's going to require any of the vendors to build an integration with an ERP system. So, and we're making progress on moving towards an ERP, and we're moving forward now, hopefully with this website, but really we're not gonna get where we wanna go unless we build integration between the ERP and the website so that, for example, when you buy something, it updates your account on the accounting software, and it tells parks that, hey, now this person's account's renewed, or whatever the system update is. So the data from our software is talking to the website, and the website's talking back to the software as well. Really, any of the vendors would have been in that spot. There was no vendor that could kind of we were hoping there might be a vendor that could provide a kind of a website and back-end software all as one package, and that's not really a thing that exists in the marketplace currently. So we just have to do both. We have to kind of go get an ERP, and we have to get that's kind of better than what we're currently with, and we have to go get a better website as well. Therefore, kind of what we really had to analyze was which content management system can really provide us with the best way to present information visually and in a well-organized manner to the public, and which of these vendors can really build an integration in the way that we need to have one built eventually. And that's going to be dependent on a lot of other cost factors that we can't determine right now. So the cost of the integration is not really built into this aspect of the contract. This is just for the generic website, and then there will be an additional cost at some point we will have to bring to you as a contract addendum to build that connection to the ERP, because we don't currently have an ERP online, right? So we have to have one first, have that up and running before we can have those 2 companies talk to each other and figure out what it's going to take to make them really work together cohesively. The total one-year cost for the proposed solutions from each vendor amounted to Granicus being $82,000, Jesse James Creative's solution was $84,000, and Planetary was actually the lowest at $58,000. But the annual recurring cost was a big differentiator here. Granicus, they wanted us to pay $55,000 a year going forward with a 5% increase, whereas Jesse James and Planetary did not have those high recurring annual costs. And part of that is explained by part of what Granicus was offering there is some things that are kind of like what an ERP does, but not quite as well as what an ERP does. So it was kind of a half-step solution. And then the total one-year cost for all available solutions, if we'd bought everything on their menu, this is the price we would be paying. And Planetaria's total menu was a lot less if we kind of went for everything that we wanted. So when comparing the design, look, features, and usability and flexibility for displaying content through each CMS, that's for content management system, we're ultimately drawn to the idea of using the open source WordPress solution, which is what Planetaria had proposed. We sought the best quality proposal, and we believe Planetaria does offer the most bang for our buck using the WordPress platform and their capability to create custom code for us as needed, especially when we get to that phase where we'll need to build an integration to the ERP. So our recommendation is that you approve this resolution so the city can enter into the contract with Planetary Media. Any questions?
Did you talk with any references or referrals on that as far as other customers that you have used Planetarian? Because it seems like it's significantly less expensive, so that really throws a big red flag for me.
Yeah, so we got reference cities and clients from each of the vendors, and we also did a lot of research and looking at all their websites and going, which sites, just blind, not knowing the cost. In fact, I did that before I read to the last page and saw pricing, so I would have a kind of a clean perception in my head before I got to the last page in their proposals of just which sites actually look best. And Planetary was the clear leader for everybody on that committee that was looking at the proposals. Is their sites just look really clean and very modern app-like kind of experience when you're on the mobile version of the website, but then also WordPress offers also the kind of the easiest way to have an app on day one, because there's an ability, there's a module that is in there where they can kind of create an app store app version of your website. So they're both controlled with the same CMS, which I think is a big deal as well, because some of the, like Granicus, they would offer an app if we bought all the way up to the highest level, if we bought everything that they're selling, they'd give us an app, and the app didn't really look good and it didn't really operate very well with the CMS, so it would not be intuitive for us as far as pushing content to both platforms, whereas this is going to be a lot more simple as far as pushing content to, okay, I want, because our vision for the app is really for it to be about the processes and the transactions that somebody needs to do with the city. So I need to renew my business license. I need to pay the Parks Department for my gym membership. I need to report a crime to the police department, and I want to begin a permit process, right? You want to do things in the app, but on the website you want to do things, but you also want to be able to find information about, well, what's the history of Nixa? And tell me a little bit about your, demographics. You want more kind of informational kind of things on the website, whereas on the app we really want to focus towards the transactional processes. And I think that this is going to give us that ability to day one, we'll start with things like signing up for alerts and news notifications and things like that. And then over time, and as we build out the integration with the ERP, then we'll be able to add in functions on the app for paying to register your kids for soccer and paying your utility bill and all those things within a single app.
So are those future planned items for the digital city hall, are those included in the reoccurring cost, or is that something we have to pay additional for as we add more forms, more pages, more?
So there's not really anticipated to be much increased annual recurring cost. It would be more of a one-time development cost for building the integrations.
So we would have to pay for that.
We would have to pay for that specifically, and the hourly rate that Planetary had quoted was $130 an hour, which was a lot lower than the others were quoting us.
Yeah.
So they also had the lowest rate on future development. They worked with us. They said that they were really impressed by our RFP, by the way. They said that they really bought into, they were excited to be working with a city that had the kind of vision that we have for what we want to do. They said a lot of the cities that they deal with don't really know, like, they're just like, I guess I would need a website, but they don't really have a vision for what to do with it. And we really had a very proactive vision for, here's some of the things we want to be able to accomplish. Here's the things we want to be able to provide to our citizens. And so they got excited. They were like, we're actually going to give you a discounted quote because we think that if we can build you what you want, we can turn around and sell it to everybody else.
I like the fact that Planetaria was, well, one, they've been around for a long time, but two, they specialize in municipal government. But the one question I have, and if you guys haven't Googled them and looked at some of their sites that they've built, you should. They've done some really cool stuff. I like how the updated news is up top. You don't have to scroll down at all, depending on your screen size.
And we'll have some custom design interaction with them where we get to kind of work with them on what we want to put where on the site. And Macy and I will be also working with each department on kind of reorganizing content and identifying things, you know, where can we compile some content, rewrite it better? What content do we not currently offer on our website that we should be offering and creating that content? And then what stuff can we pare back? What's not really, nobody ever goes visits that content. It's up there, but it's not really needed there. Let's pull it down or rethink how we're presenting that to the public. So we'll have some ability there to make our homepage and every department landing page really work for those departments the way it really needs to.
Gotcha. So the one question I do have is, everyone that is already signed up to receive some sort of notification via email or whatever, is that going to, are we going to have any issues getting that over into the new system? Are we going to have to start fresh?
So they can port over the contacts and they can port over certain things, but then I'm not going to count on that. If we have to, we'll just communicate to the community that, hey, beginning on this date, if you're getting any e-alerts via email from the city website, you're not going to get those any further. You're going to have to go into the new site and resubscribe to, because we're going to create new categories and kind of rethink that as well as far as what categories of notifications we're going to be providing. However, it's not going to impact your email newsletter that you go every month because that's done through a separate email system that's not connected to the website currently. So that's not going to affect you at all. You're not going to have to re-sign up for like the email newsletter.
And would we be able to, with this solution, would we be able to go in and I could select, I want updates on 10-year-old girls basketball, and I want updates on anything that has to do with
any category that we want to
events.
create, you'll be able to have a menu. When you go to set up your user for alerts, you'll be able to pick every category of all the menu, of any category in the menu that we say that we want to provide. And then not only that, but you'll be able to pick, I want these alerts to go to my email, but I want these to go to my cell phone. And so you'll
cool.
for the first time, we'll start to have text alerts built in to the same e-notification system so that you'll be able to kind of opt into text alerts or email or both.
Cool. And you'll be able to do, you or Macy will be able to have access to like a dashboard that you can control content and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they're going to build us a dashboard that's got some integration with Google Analytics and then some other analytics tools that are they're part of the WordPress platform.
Matt keeps making a face. We're not integrating the Nixa Parks in with this, right? It's not a replacement for that site.
There will be an ability for us to do that, kind of. What we can't replace with nixaparks.com is the fact that it talks natively to the software that he's using on the back end currently. Now, if they completely migrate out of using RecTrack and they're completely sustained by the ERP, which I don't think is going to be a deal, then we're not going to be able to replace that. So they need to have RecTrack where it is updating and creating, they manage their teams, their schedules, all these different complex things. What our website will be able to do, though, is we can kind of embed pieces of the RecTrack system into pages, into an account, or onto a page within the Planetaria site. So Nixa.com could at some point start to replace Nixa.com, where we could actually have Nixa.com redirect to a department section of Nixa.com. And basically, you don't have to look at this other site that looks different, because every bit of function would actually be embedded into that section of Nixa.com. It makes sense in my head.
I get you.
I know it doesn't make sense to anybody else.
We get it.
But
Matt's site's ugly, and so we need to integrate his site into the nice-looking site.
And that's what we're hoping.
It's functional, but it's ugly.
And we
We
don't want to
understand.
lose the function, so
We don't wanna lose the
that's
function. We got
that's the top priority, is making sure that when people are on the site and they register for something, or they pay, that payment's going through, and his software is getting updated on, well, these are the kids that are in the soccer program, and these are the kids that are in the basketball program.
And the differences that you have between the proposed solutions, first-year amount, and the all available solutions vendor amount, is which are you leaning towards, as far as are there other things in there that we don't need in the all, or can you explain that a little more?
Oh, yeah, so I should probably make clear, so if you can scroll up a little bit there, show me all the, so the total one-year cost is the cost that we would, that we're gonna enter the contract with on year one. So there are some stuff that's offered by Planetary Media that we're not gonna purchase immediately. Part of that being, now I'm gonna blank on what it was. Oh, it was for them to build a custom solution that would provide, so there's a solution that's provided by another competitor that had provided a quote to us, a Civic Plus, that's called C-Click Fix. And we actually sat through a presentation from them several years ago. And it's kind of a work order system where, like, somebody could take a picture of a pothole and submit it to the city through an app. And it'd be geotagged and all that stuff. And then it also works and it also integrates into a work order system on the back end. And not only that, but you can, like, if you were like to take a picture of a park bench that had graffiti on it, you could take a picture and say, I want to submit this, I want to report that they need to fix this park bench, right? But you could actually see, 10 other people have already reported it. So then you go, I don't need to report it. I want to subscribe to updates. So I want to know when the city fixes it. And you could subscribe. And then when the city goes in the work order system and says, we've fixed that park bench, everybody who'd subscribe to those updates about that park bench would get their phone would ping and say, hey, the city fixed that park bench. And be like, cool, right? So that capability, there's parts of that that are kind of relatively simple, like just taking a photo and submitting it to the city and saying, hey, here's this problem. That's relatively simple, but there's some other aspects there in that C-Click Fix capability, that full suite that's a little bit more complex to code and actually build. So Planetary does not sell something that does that already. So they could build one for us for most of the cost of the difference between $58,000 and $74,000. I don't remember exactly what the price was. They
So
could build something to add that capability into us. So that's something that we could do as well, but that's another thing where we don't want to do it year one, because that's going to be dependent on the ERP, because the ERP will be able to provide that work order management process. And so rather than building something proprietary that just refers to the website, we'd actually want to have something that would talk to our ERP, if that makes sense. So we kind of want to wait to see how the ERP unfolds, and then possibly build something that would gel with that.
So essentially, we're just looking at the 58,530 for this first year.
Yes.
Yes, but Ms. Peterson, we did include in the budget $80,000 in case we do get to some of that quicker than what we anticipate for the website and app.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have given us a quote for a block of time for what they think it might take to build the integration, and they're estimating that around $10,000, maybe a little bit more than that. So we've actually went ahead and budgeted for that for 2022, just in case we get that ERP online, the website's online, and we're ready to go. Maybe late in the year, we can go ahead and get that ball rolling on building that integration.
Did they give you an idea on how much involvement there'll be with the implementation and everything with you and Macy? As far as, are we losing our marketing people for 2 weeks, or?
So I'm going to be really busy with this for about a year. This is going to keep me really occupied, and Macy as well, as far as going through and updating content, and we need to we need new photographs, we need better imaging and stuff like that. With the unrolling of the new branding, we'll unveil on the website, things like that. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that gets put into rethinking and redesigning this website and how we present our brand, everything from photos to how we have written content and how we organize our content. There's going to be a lot of work going on with that. But they're going to be helping us kind of every step along the way, and there's going to be some support from their staff as well in that as far as consulting, and they're going to be consulting with all of our leadership team and staff. There will be several meetings where we'll meet with each department about their needs and trying to plan out all those transitions.
Do we have a certain bank of professional development hours for the implementation of this? And once we hit a certain amount, we have to start paying, or is it what we pay is, that's all we're gonna pay until it is to our liking?
So they gave us a quote for what they estimate to spend on it, and if they go over it, that they got to go over they're trying to kind of, they gave us a quote on the time, but then for how many, like the block of hours, but they're committed to doing the project to completion. Now, if we added something to the contract that's beyond what's in the RFP and in the contract, if we said we wanted to start doing the C-click fix kind of thing, then that would be an additional cost, or they'd probably give us the quoted cost, and we'd have to add that contract addendum, and then they'd start to work on that.
So
Does that make sense? So if it's included in the RFP and what we've already talked about, they have to do that at the quote price.
And the integration, they provide a blank hours because we don't know what system they have to integrate with yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that'd be something that would work out with the ERP system.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Drew.
Welcome.
And we will open up the public hearing if you would like to speak to this item. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? No? I think we're good. Motion to approve?
So made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all very much. All right, move on to our unfinished business 2022 budget discussion.
It's going to be short and sweet. All right. This is just a follow-up discussion of our budget work session. And what I would like to do is just kind of go over the things that have changed in the last week. So it's not going to be a ton of stuff. So let's talk about general fund revenues, what we've changed. If you notice on your budget dashboard, the transfers into administration and stormwater from ARPA. So based on council's direction, we're transferring $980,000 to admin and $600,000 to stormwater for those projects, the ERP system and the website in admin, and for the Cherry Street stormwater project. And just as a way of recap and reminder, the sales tax that is included in the budget is a 2% increase over estimated 2021 totals. So just keep that in mind. That's what we're basing our sales tax revenue on. And then the park revenue included the increase in fees related to the pool that Matt went over last week. So just remember that. In the special revenue funds, no changes to revenues in either streets or ARPA funds. And again, sales tax for the transportation, sales tax is a 2% increase over estimated 2021 totals. In the enterprise funds, there's a transfer into wastewater from ARPA for the Oakmont lift station in the amount of $2,342,767. That the budget for that is $2.5 million. So the difference there, the $157,233, that will be paid for out of the wastewater fund for that project. And the rate study that Doug went over this evening, those recommended rates are what's in the budget. So the electric revenues that are in the budget are with the decrease in the rates. So just keep that in mind. Okay, questions or thought about the changes in revenues? Okay, let's move on to the expense, and we're going to talk about personnel, then operations, debt, and capital. In the general fund, in expense for personnel, this change is a raise to the commissioned officers of $2.50 per hour, including COLA. So it's a raise plus a COLA that equals $2.50, not $2.50 and then a COLA, if that makes sense. So what I did was, that means our starting hourly rate for officers goes from $19.07 to $21.57, $2.50 more. So that puts us a little bit more in line on the upper end there.
Yep, and then I'll just interject real quick. Ms. Graham, you did ask us to look at additional officers as well, but in speaking with Chief Campbell, and if he would like to speak, he's more than welcome, but we looked at the possibility of adding additional officers or giving up to $2.50, and we're given the option, to give the higher increase to be able to fill those positions. Right now would be the priority, but if Chief Campbell would like to comment, he's more than welcome.
Yeah, there was a significant discussion about that, although, I'm not going to say that we don't need officers, because we certainly need officers, but at this point, retention and of the officers that we have and recruitment of any vacant positions that we've talked about over the past several years, I would prioritize those over those new positions. Now, that always lends to the conversation of how are you going to stretch the existing personnel to do the job that we're asking them to do. We did have a change in the shift length, so that's going to help with some of those staffing, number of units fielded per day. And then, we're just going to have to monitor that as we go through the course of the next year. That need never typically goes down. I've been here 19 years, and I can tell you that calls for service go up and demand for service goes up. And so I would anticipate the things that we don't address this year in this budget, we will come back certainly and have to address it the following year.
So what we had requested, or what had been proposed by council last time, was a $1 raise and 2 new officers. And so instead of that, we're doing $2.50 and no new officers.
Yeah, and also this scale, as Jennifer pointed out, it really, at the $2.50, including that COLA, actually allows us, although it includes all commissioned officers, it weighs heavily on the lower line level officers. So if that makes sense, so that increase would be, the starting salary would benefit from that.
Any other questions about that? So I put a little note on your budget dashboard. In reviewing this, of course, I look at this constantly over and over and over, and I find little things. And so when we had our discussion last week, it came to my attention that the overtime for police was counted twice. So in that ratio of revenue to operations, it was counted twice. And so when I found that and took it out, it lowered our percentage. And so just running about 1,000 different scenarios, we do have the option, if you so chose, to go to 100% contributory with loggers, which is the goal in the next few years. But that way we are kind of spreading out that benefit across the entire city and not just all for the police. So that is an option, and if we do that, it just raises that percentage just a little bit into the 97s instead of 96. Just an option for you. I wanted to remind you again that health and ancillary insurance rates are not increasing, and that this budget does not include a merit increase. And then the inflation rate year-to-date is 4.67%. Social Security COLA has already been set at 5.9. The COLA is based on inflation rates by quarter, and I just wanted to show you what quarter one inflation rate is 2.21%, quarter two 5.72, and quarter three is 6.08. Social Security is actually set by the third quarter's numbers. And so this is our inflation rate for the Midwest, is the number that I take off of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So a 4.67 COLA is, it's generous, but it's not quite as high as, you know, what we really are sitting at, so.
And then, before she moves on, I'll just point out again, I know Jennifer mentioned it, but we do have a unique opportunity if council is comfortable doing so. You know, I mentioned last week that we're doing a 2% originally in the budget on loggers, where the employee would still have to contribute 2%. This would give us a unique opportunity, since we did fortunately found a little extra money in a miscalculation. It would give us a unique opportunity to go ahead and take on that full 4% this year for all the employees, which would put us in line with the majority of the cities across the state, although there are still some out there that are like us, currently 4% or 2%. But overall, it would provide us the opportunity to take care of this in 1 year instead of spreading out in 2 years. We were planning on trying to make that other 2% jump next year just because of budget constraints this year. But that's obviously up to council, but we just wanted to point that out. It would bring that percentage up to 97.7 something.
Well, and obviously it can't hurt, but, I mean, do you think this would help with recruitment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we could definitely, you know, advertise to people that we are completely non-contributory. But I also think that, and I also think it could help with retention of employees as well. Because, you know, currently they have to pay that percentage, so that would be an additional amount on their take-home pay every paycheck. So I think it would do both. It would help with recruitment, but it would really help with retention.
Okay, special revenue funds, no changes to personnel in streets. We don't have any personnel in ARPA. In the enterprise funds, I added one intern position each in electric and water because Jimmy forgot to tell me to put it in there to begin with. So I put it in there. It's an intern position that's just 336 hours a year in each electric and water. Oh, so that was it for personnel. In operations, so I added a column for the use of impact fees on your budget dashboard because we need to show that we're using those impact fees so that we reduce the cash balance. And I had put it as a placeholder in the operating expense in park, and then I thought it's not an operating expense, so I took it out. So there again, it sort of lowered that percentage. So, but we do need to account for it and show it because we have to use impact fees within 7 years of when they're collected. Otherwise, we have to give them back. So we use them for debt service and capital expenditures and things like that. So it's just a tricky way of how you have to account for it and show it. But so that was a change that you might have noticed. I don't know. But no other significant additions or deletions to the operations budget as it was presented to you last week. So nothing major, nothing at all really. All right, in debt, no changes to the debt budget as presented. We will be making some changes as soon as we have the RDE discussion, but until that time, nothing has been added into the budget for it. So nothing changed with that. In capital, I moved the total cost of the ERP and website project to admin. It was being split and cost shared amongst departments, but since ARPA funds will be used to pay for it, it just needs to come out of one. No changes to the police capital budget. We cut $100,000 from the Christmas lighting display project in parks. And then the 2022 phase of the Cherry Street Stormwater Project, we changed to $600,000 as opposed to $620 to reflect the amount of the ARPA transfer. We just pushed that additional $20,000 to the next year. It's a multi-year, multi-phase project. And then the streets, the website cost share was removed. And in the central garage, there was a project that was in there that's really an operational cost, and so I moved it out of the capital budget into the operational budget. Electric, water, wastewater is going to be the same thing. The website cost share was removed. And so that's all for capital. Okay. Any questions about any of the expense stuff? My dead money tree.
So we need to provide guidance on the $2.50 raise for officers versus the $1 raise and 2 new officers. And do we want to do the 4% contributory versus the 2% this year and 2% next year or the year after.
And so all that pretty much puts us back where we thought we were last meeting, correct?
Pretty
close,
much.
Yes.
I will say too
Okay.
that it came to my attention tonight on the court thing that the number I was given for the court clerk was lower than what was here, so it was about $6,000 lower, so I had to increase that, which brought the percentage up like 0.5%, so it's a little bit different, but, so yes, it's in the 97 point
7.4.
something, maybe 7.9 now, 97.79.
I like it.
Still too high. That's okay.
I would be in favor of pushing in the 4%, just go straight to non-contributory.
I mean, if we can get to our goal faster without going insane. What was the percentage before going from 2 to 4?
It's on your budget.
I'm
It's
probably
like
went past that page
96.7
already.
to 97.7, something close to that. So
Oh.
it was about 1%.
Okay.
That's pretty close.
Well, and that's.
The other thing I hadn't thought about before was if we just give a higher COLA, because it seems like maybe our COLA is a little low. If we just did a higher COLA, because that would be reflected in our starting salaries as well. What I'm afraid is going to happen is when we do the salary survey next year, then you're going to come in and say, oh, we have to raise everybody's salary X% because we because we didn't give them enough COLA this year to keep up with inflation, right?
But I will also remind you that during the last salary survey, they said we needed to go to non-contributory, so I do anticipate that in the next
Sure,
salary
yep.
survey as well. Yep. But no, point well taken. But
Yeah. We have X amount of money, so we could spend it in either way.
Either way.
Either way would go to the employee.
Yep.
And one, they would get an additional 2% next year or the year after, whenever we were able to afford that. Whereas, then the COLA would affect the base rate for those positions.
It would, correct, yep. If you rated higher COLA, that would increase the starting pay for each position.
So we would go to 4%, 5% COLA?
So we're at 4.67, so we could go to 5.5, which would be closer to the Social Security COLA. And then do 2%, and we'd still be pretty close, about the same probably, somewhere roughly.
We can run those numbers, if you want to stay around that same percent and see what that comes out to.
Okay, so 5.5% COLA and a 2% loggers contributory and the $2.50 police raise puts us at 97.12%.
That drops us down about half a percent.
0.6
About
or
half a percent, yeah.
So let me see what happens if
But it gives employees more this year and the opportunity to get more next year when we go to full contributory.
yeah, so if I raise the loggers rate, it makes it 98.04%.
If you did both, if you did both.
all.
You did 5.5 plus 4%.
Yes.
Yep.
Can you find more money? Just somewhere in there.
We can leave our electric rates where they're at, and that would, no, that's a different department.
conversation for another
Different
day.
department, yeah.
So I sprung you on that, but do you have a preference one way or the other, Jim?
Well, I can tell you that as far as the employees' take-home pay, you're looking at adding a percent to COLA versus giving them 2%.
Sure.
So it would be a smaller amount in their paycheck, take-home pay just by 1%, but it would also help the recruitment aspect because that is shown on the starting pay. But generally speaking, for the employee, they would have a smaller amount, but a bigger paycheck or take-home pay at the 2% loggers.
So what's our biggest challenge, retention or recruitment?
Yes. Sorry, that's the true answer, though. It is.
It
really
is,
both.
I get it, I know it's
They
a tough
go
question.
Lack of
but-
available funding.
Yeah,
is
it's
our issue.
unfortunately, we just can't fund it all, but
Right, no, I understand.
it's correct. It's both. We have a very difficult time with recruitment right now across most all the departments, from police to streets to wastewater. It's just a struggle all year long, but also so is retention. We're constantly having turnover, and the number one reason, and I don't know where Amanda went, but the number one reason we're getting in our employee exit interviews is consistently pay. And that's one of the main reasons that we're losing employees throughout the year. So, I mean, let's face it, we're paying some of our employees $13 an hour, and they can go to fast food and make much more than that.
So if we can keep them, then we don't have to recruit them.
So yes, it is both. So I wish I could tell you one outweighs the other, but right now we're struggling with both. Yep. But obviously recruitment, it would be the COLA would be the recruitment because you're adding that to the starting salary.
Well, we'll have to be really good at recruiting if we keep losing them.
Right. So do you want to focus on keeping, or you want to focus on recruiting?
Yes.
Yes.
I know.
The correct answer is yes.
Chicken and egg.
Wouldn't it be fun as non-governmental employees if you got to go into the board meeting and listen to what your employers were saying about how they were going to give you raises?
Yeah.
How they were trying to
Everybody's
accommodate
really
your
paying
raises.
attention right now,
Yeah.
I can tell you.
So,
Everybody woke up.
that's interesting.
I will say this, just point out timing issues. We have to publish, I have to publish a budget summary in the newspaper 2 full weeks before the public hearing on the budget, which will be the first reading, which will be the second meeting in November. So backing all that up, I have to have this to the paper by Friday. So,
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm
you
sure.
gotta decide right
No rush or
now.
anything, but
I'm sure things, yeah. This has to be published next Wednesday, because the paper comes out on a Wednesday. So to give 2 full weeks of publication before that meeting, that's when it has to be. So,
We just have to shake our heads. So
Okay.
I say we go with Jimmy's recommendation. We would go with the 4%. That would be my recommendation to you. Is we
Yes.
go with what Jimmy said and not what I said. We ignore what I said and we go with what Jimmy said.
Go with what was presented just tonight.
And if it helps any, that would be my recommendation, is the 4%, because I really feel strongly that we need to stick to the average COLA and try not to vary off of that one way or the other, because that gives us a good number to look at year after year to make sure that we're being fair to our employees.
Okay,
Agreed.
that sounds fair as well.
And then 250 for officers.
250 for
Correct.
officers. 4% contributory, 250 including COLA for officers.
okay.
Okay?
Any other changes?
Shakes their head, yes. Okay, yes, that's what we will do.
Mayor, council, thank you for your work on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
You guys did a lot of
Yeah,
work to
thank you.
get that done.
Is there anything else we needed to do? I don't know. Can't think of it. Okay. All right, we'll move on to our new business. Got 15 minutes?
Yeah, you're gonna be pushing it, man.
We still got an executive session, so.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna.
Ah, well. I got
There's
pizza
that pen I thought I lost. Mayor and council, he's getting it?
He's
Okay.
working on it.
This presentation, it's a presentation to get started. Obviously, it's new business. Months ago, staff was approached by owners of RDE Water Company, and it's a number of months ago. And a few months later, we were also approached by the owner of Tuscany Hills Water and Sewer about the city purchasing their utilities. Both companies have decided to get out of the business for one reason or another. And though both had already been contacted by some of the investor-owns, they're both local people, and they wanted to provide an opportunity, hoping that it would wind up under the city's control versus an investor-owned utility. Staff's done a considerable amount of due diligence investigating virtually everything to do with buying another utility, which I'll explain more as we go through this. We've utilized professional consultants, including engineers, attorneys, to determine asset values, 5-year operations and capital cost, or projected 5-year cost, as well as revenues, and dug deep into what capital improvements might be needed to bring all this together if we were to purchase these two utilities. To give you an idea of where these are, and I don't know which one of these to point to, the RDE system is everything in blue. So to give you a point of reference, this is Walmart right here. So this would be Bentwater right here. So they're serving all of these blue areas. Now, their territory would actually, if you look at their PSC filing, their territory actually covers all of this, is what they would be approved by the PSC to actually serve, although these are the areas they currently serve. Tuscany Hills is a water and sewer system, and it is the area that is marked here in yellow, and here's a blow-up of it. This would be the Oak Property Parkland right here. So it's it's the subdivision right adjacent to it, as well as a few industrial customers over here on the north side of AA. RDE it's considerably older system than the Tuscany Hills system. I think it dates back to the early 70s, maybe the late 60s. 70, I was going to say 71 is kind of what I had in my mind, but I didn't have that exact. The RDE system includes 2 utility capacity wells. Their current production capacity is 870 gallons a minute, although the well number 2, their most recent well, with some pump upgrades, could probably pump considerably more. It appears to be what's a very decent well. One of the locations, well number 2, has a 250,000 ground storage tank, which is what you see in the picture there. Ground storage tank, the difference of one of those than a standpipe or a tower, elevated tower like we use, is that storage, and they actually use pumping systems to keep the pressure regulated, whereas we use gravity from the towers. They also have a 47,000 gallon standpipe tower, approximately 28 and a half miles of 2-inch through 10-inch PVC. Their customer count is roughly, these numbers are actually from the documents when we started. It could fluctuate from a little bit from today. 1,072 residential customers and 66 commercial customers. Of those 66, one of those is a single master meter that serves all of the English Village. So I don't know how they do that downstream. Don't really care. It's kind of nice. They've just got one meter to deal with, and you don't have to deal with, or you don't have all the individual customers. Tuscany Hills system there's basically one well with a standpipe. I believe it's 60,000 gallons, 66,000 gallons capacity. It consists of the newer 6 and 8-inch mains. Tuscany Hills system is much newer. It's roughly 11 years old, so it's much newer. There's only 87 residential and 3 commercial customers. The sewer system is 8-inch PVC sewer collection system, virtually just like we would build. It also includes a sand filter treatment facility that is in the northwest portion, or down at the bottom by the river on the northern end of that facility. Let's see, let me get this. Both of the properties, of course, both of the utilities have properties that are owned. The well locations for all 3 well locations, there's property that goes along with those, as well as the sewer treatment facility. Due diligence on our part, I briefly mentioned a little bit of it. We have done third-party valuation and land appraisals for the RDE system, including the well and tower properties. We needed to get actual land valuation for the properties themselves on that particular one. We've completed a survey-grade GIS mapping of the RDE system, including complete title search of all the land and easements. The RDE system is, as I mentioned, much older. Their mapping system is not near what Tuscany Hills would be, or what ours is. And so we weren't sure. We had to check to make sure that there were actually easements covering where the pipes were and those types of things, because it wasn't mapped or installed as we would do so. So we actually had to do a survey grade GIS system for it. So Provided we would move forward and purchase this, that GIS mapping would already be done on our end, and we could incorporate it straight in. This was not necessary to do on the Tuscany Hill system because it's all laid out as built drawings and that type of thing, so we knew where everything was. It's all in easements because it's all within a platted subdivision. So it made that much easier to do. We've completed DNR and PSC, Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and Missouri Public Service Commission record searches. One of our consultants has also met with PSC staff to discuss the potential sales and seek PSC support. Because these other utilities are regulated by the PSC, they have to do an approval for that sale. Now, once they're sold, if we were to purchase those, they're not regulated by PSC anymore. They would come under the purview of the regulation of City Council like we are right now. We've also developed proposed asset purchase agreements. An asset purchase agreement it's basically like a contract to buy a house. It lays out everything that needs to be done before you get to a closing point, including the price, PSC approvals, some of those types of things that have to be taken care of. To come up with the system values and appraisal methodology, RDE RDE came to us when Mr. Bing was here, 2006 or so, many years ago. They basically had the same appraisal, which was a replacement cost less depreciation appraisal. That particular appraisal was just over $2.8 million. At the time, it was a completely different time, and there was no thought for the city to get into serving utilities outside the city. Staff originally, once we received that, staff did an internal replacement cost less depreciation and methodology, and we put together our own, and because, one, it was 16 years older today than it was back when it was originally done. We also found some discrepancies in some of the items. The meters were, as an example, the meters were valued as new when in fact they were 20 and 30 years old. So we changed around, did some things there, and we actually came up with a $2.2 million number. Now, that being said, we didn't have a land appraisal and some of those others. So Tuscany Hill system, of course, is very new. It's built virtually almost identical to the way we would build today, with the same type of piping, all of those types of things. So valuation on it is much simpler to do. The other issue that makes valuation of Tuscany Hills so much simpler is the cost that we were or the price that we were approached with. The price that we were approached with would not build the sewer treatment plant that they have up there today. So that, and that's the cost for the whole thing, the water and the sewer. So it made it to where we really didn't need to go into an appraisal of any type because it was considerably low. We have had some verbal negotiations with the owners, obviously knowing full well that this had to come to council and you had to have an interest to own it and approve for this to move forward. But we have had verbal negotiations to set up the asset purchase agreement. The RDE system, that negotiation has led to $2.5 million and $500,000 for the Tuscany Hills and water and sewer systems combined. There's one of the things I want to point out is the added benefit and cost savings to Nixa's existing system. Our current 5-year master plan includes necessary system enhancements for both new growth and to cure some pressure deficiencies we have on the northern end of town. You may be able to speak to that. Some of those items in our 5-year master plan include a new well and tower at the north end of town, and also a large loop line to connect some of the towers and level out the pressures across the northwest section. So we need to build a new 12-inch line from a line that exists over by High Point School all the way up to CC across to Bentwater. So that's a long piece of line. And you even see some of that in our CIPs that we just recently submitted to you. The cost of that project is roughly around $4 million. Provided the RDE system were incorporated into ours, we have that well, we have the land, we would still need to build a tower. However, we would also shave off some of that 12-inch piping for that connection in between the two. And roughly, we could save about $1.5 million of that $4 million that we're anticipating to spend in the next few years to cover those. Getting into initial operations and long-term planning. The operations for both systems, of course, initially we just have to maintain as is until we could be ahead of, the personnel issues. We would need to add some personnel and some equipment, a truck and a backhoe. So it would take us some time to get that going, but it would also allow some time to do some of the engineering and the planning, some bidding. And so we've laid out a 5 or 6 year plan. Year one, of course, we would immediately complete a system-wide meter replacement. As I mentioned, the RDE meters are very old. It appears to us that a lot of those are moving very slow and they're not even capturing the revenue of the water that's going through there. They have a tremendous water loss. We backed the numbers into their last PSC, or their PSC filing of 2019. Their water loss ratio is pushing 80%. So that means that there's a lot of water going through the meter that's not getting registered. We would complete that. We would incorporate, and of course, next year we'll also start updating our 5-year master plan in water and completing a flow model. We would incorporate both of those systems into that to confirm what we're already seeing in that 5-year master plan. And we'd complete a system-wide leak survey because there's got to be, like I mentioned, the water loss ratio is so high, we don't know how much of that's meters and how much of it's actually leaks. So we would do a leak survey and start getting those taken care of. Years 2 through 6, we'd begin tying in isolated sections of these systems to ours, started joining the systems, and we would do this a little piece at a time. Our pressures are higher than the pressures of the RDE system and the Tuscany system, so we have to be careful to only implement just a little bit of that at a time, because if we cause some leaks or those types of things, we need to repair that and get all that taken care of before we start bringing in the next section. We need to do it in phases until it's eventually all brought in. Also, during that year 2 through 6 would be, we're anticipating the construction of that 1 million-gallon tower in year 4, and so that would take place in the middle of there, as would, as you might have noticed in that picture, how rusty that tank looked. We need to do in year 2 and 3. We need to repaint those towers, have them cleaned, that type of thing. They've been lacking some maintenance on that side of it. Estimated revenues. Nixa's outside, now the way our water rates are set up, outside city rate is 1.5 times the inside city rate. That rate is higher than what RDE is currently charging, although it's pretty nominal with the Tuscany system. So we would, in addition, not only is our rate a little higher, but if those meters were running slow, there's going to be an issue there with cost going up. My hope and our desire would be that the services would increase commensurate with that. Using the sales volumes reported by RDE with Nixa's rates, we could see a revenue source of about $443,000 in the first year of operation. We're anticipating that if we went through the meter change out, that could move us as high as $620,000 in revenue. That's the potential difference by just replacing the meters and not changing any cost. We've conservatively estimated the annual Tuscany Hills revenue at around $40,000. That's on the water side. I did not give you an estimate of the sewer. Do you have an idea on that? Yeah, I don't want to, I don't even want to stab at it.
But we build them similar to ours, it should be was it twice as much as the water or whatever? Don't we have some formula
Yeah.
that tells you that? I guess
It's
but
got to be,
usage-based,
it's
yeah.
got to be very comparable. See, part of the way they're doing their charges is they're kind of built in with their HOA, so they don't have these separate billings and readings, so it's kind of hard for us to judge that. We're basing it on what we believe is the way it was constructed, what their potential costs are, and their number of customers. So that's about as close as we'll be able to get, and I think it's very safe because they seem to have very good system, both the sewer and the water. Finance, revenue and expense projections. We've completed, as I mentioned,
Oh, you skipped
verbal.
the last paragraph of the other page.
I'm sorry?
You skipped the last paragraph of the other page. There you go. What we would do to offset their higher rates that we would.
Oh, as well as, yeah, as an offset to higher rates, of course, our operations will bring better service and eventually higher pressures. Those higher pressures, and I've already had some conversations with the fire chief. He was excited to even find out we were looking at it. He heard it somewhere, and obviously he's wants to be able to bring down obviously the ISO ratings, which in turn have an effect on, on the customers' insurance rates. Financing and revenue expense projections. I mentioned well, no, I didn't. Staff we completed the verbal and subject to council approval purchase prices. The RDE system cost is $2.5 million. Tuscany Hills is combined water and sewer at $500,000. It would be, if we move forward, it would be staff's recommendation for the financing for the RDE system. We would bond that. I hate the thought of going back into debt, but honestly, it's in looking at how we put this together, it's the way to do it, and we can turn it around and have it paid out, and it would pay for itself in 10 years. It would pay off the bond in 10 years and still remain solvent. So we would do that by bonding $3 million, and the reason I did that, that additional $500,000, I'm not thinking of that for the RDE system. I'm thinking that as the operating for some of those beginning capital improvements in the RDE system, such as the meter changeouts, the new equipment, hiring 3 personnel, those types of things. And you'll see it when I get to the spreadsheet here in a few minutes. The Tuscany Hills systems, basically that splits out to $250,000 for the water department and $250,000 for the wastewater department. And I think there's sufficient reserves in both of those departments. We could cash out right with those two and incorporate them into the system just fine. They're not going to add more personnel on top of what we would do with RDE and the personnel that we already have in wastewater, because we're already adding a utility worker in wastewater for next year regardless of this, and we think that can be spread out for those systems just fine. Using these amounts, we put together your slide actually says 10-year. I'm sorry I didn't get that number updated because I've actually pushed it out to 12 because I wanted to get out a couple of years past paying off the bonds. So we'll move to the hardest thing to read in this whole deal. I tried to set this up to look like one of our budget sheets. As you can see at the top, water sales in that first year, I mentioned the $400,000+. I've included about $40,000 for revenue. Now this basically covers water. This won't cover the sewer side. How did I do that?
Drew did it.
Oh, Drew did it. Thanks, Drew. And of course, year 2 is reflecting the change out of the meters and what we anticipate the increase in revenue would be just simply from the meter change out. Years 3 through 12, after that, we've included a 1% increase either through some form of rate changes or customer additions and higher sales. In the miscellaneous revenue that's showing there at $500,000, that's where I have pushed in the revenue to offset that $500,000 worth of that bond. Jennifer's probably over there cringing. I'm not even going to look, but that's how I kind of had to do it so I could come up with my numbers. Drew, if you could scroll back out just a little bit. As you can see, we've estimated cost for the different items. And then the $210,000 that's highlighted there, that would be an estimate for equipment cost. You can see the meters I've added into year one. System repairs obviously is high. We're hoping that's way too high, but we're anticipating, as we start incorporating the system, that we'll be finding these leaks, and we may need to do some considerable repairs there. We've got our fingers crossed that it won't be near that much. Salaries for the 3 personnel, and then I've included some numbers there for wells and towers, the cleaning out and the painting of the various towers. And I've also shown the $400,000 in year 4, which would be RDE Tuscany portion of that 1 million gallon tower that we would put out there. I've included an approximate $300,000 finance payment. That's going to be off by a little bit, plus or minus. That was an estimate based on a rough estimate we received from our financial advisors. So go all the way back out, Drew, please. So when you look at the bottom lines, you can see revenue versus expense under that dark line. You can see where obviously because of putting that $500,000 in that first year to start picking up those startup costs, we're able to stay positive until we get to year 4, and that $400,000 capital outlay is what really pushes that negative, and it makes the total cumulative cash even negative. Now, keep in mind, all of this would be incorporated into our other budget, but that's the effect that this would have on its own, as I can estimate it. From there, you can see as we move forward, we get all the way over to year 10. That's where we pay off the bonds. Year 11 and 12 is where, obviously, we start really building those capital reserves for the future. Now, I'm not taking into account any large increases in customers or any of that type of thing. This is basically roughed out to what's actually out there. So if nothing changed, this is where I anticipate we could potentially be. So, summary and recommendations. Based on our assessment, we believe there's strong support to consider the purchase of both the RDE Water Company and Tuscany Hills Water and Sewer Systems. Ownership of these systems provides a number of benefits to the existing customers of those systems. As far as a higher level of service, we obviously have a much higher level of service, quicker response times, and those types of things. The well and land assets allow for us to complete already planned improvements to our existing system at a reduced cost, while still enhancing their systems as well, or those systems. Providing water and sewer treatment capabilities to this area also provides us some considerable advantages towards future economic development in the northern area of the community. There are a number of places up there that are not served by sewer. The sewer treatment plant that is there, it's already built, I don't know how many times larger than what they're actually running through it, and it's built so it can be doubled in size. So there's a considerable amount of capacity, unused capacity in that sewer treatment plant as if we were to start annexing some customers to the north, annexing some of those lands, we could actually serve serve sewer up there. And then one thing that I haven't mentioned other than after that first slide was this would provide us water and sewer utilities for the Oath Park, which there's nothing out there right now. I mean, there is. They could get some water service through RDE. However, tapping sewer is a whole nother animal, and we would be able to do that with this. That was the last slide. So, steps necessary to move forward. After, obviously, we have some questions and answer any of those from you. Staff would be presenting an asset purchase agreement for council's consideration. We have drafts of those with the company owners for them to just kind of look into them. They've had them for a little bit, and we haven't heard anything negative from them yet. And so that would be our next move, and then that way we could spell out, here's the timeline and here's what it would take. Obviously, we would need to get bonds. We have spoke with our financial folks about that, so they're kind of on the ready to be able to move on that if we needed to. And then another step would be, and the way this lines out, we would probably wind up with, a budget amendment to cover these revenues and these expenses coming up. This probably isn't going to get turned around by the time you have approved this budget, and so it would be something that would come to you separately for that at that time. So I'm ready to answer any questions, so.
Any questions?
I think you guys have already answered all my questions. So.
That's a lot of questions.
This isn't the first time we.
The thing I like about this is the fact that in the future, if people would want to be annexed into the city limits, or we would want to annex, we'd already have water and sewer hooked up. And that's a major thing.
It also lowers their bill,
Yes, very much so.
so, because they would come to our rate versus the 1.5 rate.
Yeah.
Well, and not to mention the fact that in order for us to do anything with the Oaf Parkland, which we already own, it has to have water and sewer. So that has to happen one way or another.
Yes, it does.
Might help us develop them sooner as well.
This is a lot to take in, so I'm sure you're going to have some questions. So as I mentioned earlier, don't hesitate to give me a shout if you think of something after this. Will also be able to provide these slides to you and this information to you as well. So
If you can put that on the agenda, update the agenda with that as well.
we'll do it. Anything else for tonight?
Any other questions? A lot of information.
It is. It's a lot to soak in.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Doug.
You bet.
Can we postpone our executive session till the next meeting? It's kind of late. Our brains are all tired.
Mr. Manasseri has a question.
No, I'm sorry, you cannot. Sorry. Mr. Manasseri. All right. That's the last item on our agenda. Anything else from staff?
I'll remind you that we have our Halloween Spectacular event Friday night, 5:30 to 8:30 at Macaulay Park. Dress up, Mayor, and we'll expect to see you out there.
That will be have to be at the football game.
And then, State of
As
the
an
Community
employee of
Dinner.
the school district, I am required to be at the football game.
State of the Community Dinner as well, tomorrow night.
State of the Community Dinner tomorrow. We'll see you all there. Yeah. Anything else from council? Nope. We do have State of the Community Dinner tomorrow and Creeping at the Crossroads on Saturday night. Another great event for Halloween. All right, nothing else? Motion to adjourn?
So am I.
Oh, do I need to do anything, Nick, to postpone the other thing since it's on the agenda? Sorry.
I mean, no, you don't vote to approve the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, so you don't need to vote to amend it.
Okay.
It's tentative, it's supposed to provide notice of what the council could discuss, so by consent of council, you can just move along.
I'll say yes. Okay, all right. Motion to adjourn?
So am I.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.